Chapter 26:31. Blood splashed everywhere. Screams shook the sky. The mountains and rivers that had already collapsed in the battle were showing a scene of death like purgatory. Boom! Lin Sun and the 3 Tao bodies fought wildly. All kinds of power overlapped and covered the sky, showing a momentum of crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Before long, 4 more Li clansmen were killed in the battlefield. Some were killed by the sword rain. Some were smashed by the abyssal sword cauldron. Some were incinerated by the terrible Taoism. In the process, some people used their trump cards, but they were either avoided by Lin Sun in time or resolved by Lin Sun's own trump cards. In fact, Lin Sun had confirmed in the battle that the abyssal sword cauldron, which had refined and absorbed many immortal substances over the years, could completely resist some so-called trump card. For example, the immortal willpower imprinted in the Jade Talisman and the secret treasures containing the power of order could be resisted by the abyssal sword cauldron. In other words, the abyssal sword cauldron, which had been nourished by the power of order and absorbed many immortal substances over the years, had become extremely magical and was no longer an ordinary emperor weapon. Therefore, after Li Henshui's death, the battle was completely one-sided. At this time, only 3 Li clansmen were struggling to hold on. Crack! The thick cyan shield cracked and exploded. An opponent at the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm was directly smashed by Lin Sun's fist. Under the terrible fist force, the opponent's whole body exploded. Let's go! The remaining 2 people rushed madly, trying to kill their way out of the encirclement. Suddenly, Lin Sun's 3 Tao bodies swarmed up and launched a fatal attack on one of them. Boom! As the divine radiance swept out, that person's soul was directly blown away and scattered. Lin Sun was just about to deal with the last opponent, but he suddenly noticed something. He stopped and frowned. The next moment, he decisively abandoned the fleeing opponent, and together with the 3 Tao bodies, he collected the spoils on the battlefield, turned around and left. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. In the battlefield that showed signs of destruction, the last Li clansman couldn't help but be surprised. His expression kept changing, as if he couldn't believe that Lin Sun would let him go so easily. After that, his gaze swept the battlefield, and he was completely stunned as he gazed at the mountains and rivers that had been destroyed like ruins. His mind had completely collapsed. He was the only one left. The clansmen by his side had already turned into ashes and vanished from this world. Indescribable anger, fear, grief, and despair drowned him like a tide. When Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong rushed over with their clansmen, they saw such a scene. The expressions of Gu Banzwang and the others changed while their pupils dilated. How could they not understand that a bloody and cruel battle had erupted here before they arrived here? As for Li Henshui and the others, it was extremely likely that they had already died. What about Li Henshui and the others? Gu Banzwang took a deep breath and asked, and he seemed to still be in disbelief. Dead, they're all dead. The lonely clan member seemed as if he was possessed. He sat paralyzed on the ruins of the mountains and rivers, and he seemed to have lost his soul. Gu Banzwang and the others looked at each other, and their hearts were filled with great shock. There was a total of 19 people in Li Henshui's group, and every single one of them possessed a combat strength that an ordinary figure couldn't compare to. Yet now, only a single person remained. It was Lin Sun? Gu Banzwang couldn't help but ask. Who else could it be besides him? The Li clan member's entire body trembled, and he seemed to have recalled a terrifying and bloody scene, causing him to howl sorrowfully like a wild beast. It's all of you. It's all of your fault. We agreed that we were only going to kill a clone, but all of this was fake. It was fake. His voice shook the heavens and the earth, and the dense despair and rage within it caused the expressions of Gu Banzwang and the others to change indeterminately. How could I have imagined that even Li Henshui wasn't a match for him? Gu Banzwang sighed lightly while her charming and delicate face became much gloomier. According to her knowledge, Li Henshui possessed a trump card that was like a taboo, and it was a divine statue refined from the eternal gold body that possessed boundlessly terrifying might. But it was under such circumstances that Li Henshui had died. This was undoubtedly a grievous news, and it caused Gu Banzwang's mood to become even heavier. Besides his heaven-defying battle prowess, this lad must possess an extremely troublesome trump card. Otherwise, Li Henshui wouldn't have suffered such a crushing defeat. Yun Luohong spoke, his expression as indifferent as before, but his eyes had already been replaced by a solemn look. "Show us what you saw using a secret technique." Gu Banzwang looked at the Li clan member. She was eager to know how Lin Sun had killed Li Henshui and the others. The Li clan member roared hoarsely, "So what if I show you? Can you kill Lin Sun? Can you?" Being questioned in such a manner, Gu Banzwang and the others felt a little embarrassed. In the battle to defend the arena, the Nan clan had suffered a crushing defeat. And now, the Li clan had been killed to the point where only one person was left. All of this was enough to prove how dangerous and terrifying Lin Sun was. Under such circumstances, could the Gu clan and Yun clan really suppress Lin Sun with their strength alone? Everyone couldn't help but be shaken. "Haha, you can't either. In the great void immortal realm, no one can kill Lin Sun, no one." The Li clan member stood up and staggered away like a madman. As he walked further and further away, his sorrowful voice reverberated endlessly between heaven and earth. "Brother Luohong, what should we do?" Gu Banzwang looked at Yun Luohong with her beautiful eyes. Yun Luohong fell into a rare silence. Previously, he had led people and Gu Banzwang to chase after Lin Sun in another direction, but in the end, they had failed. Until just now, when they suddenly received Li Henshui's jade talisman for help, they rushed over without hesitation. But it was clear that they were a step too late. "This lad is too dangerous. If we continue to chase, I'm afraid there will be more and more casualties." After a long time, Yun Luohong spoke in a low voice, a gloomy expression on his face. For a Tao ancestor from the seventh heaven to say such words was no different from admitting his inferiority. The Gu clan and Yun clan members all felt their chests tighten, and their moods sank. That Lin Sun was really impossible to defeat? This made them feel very uncomfortable. "It's good to give up." Gu Banzwang looked as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She stretched out her hand and patted her towering snow-white breast. "In any case, there are still some immortals standing guard outside the ruins of the gods. If Lin Sun really leaves this place alive, it will definitely be difficult for him to resist the killing intent of those immortals. Isn't it too shameful to admit defeat like this?" Someone couldn't help but ask. Gu Banzwang's beautiful eyes widened. "Shameful? All right, why don't you continue to court death?" That person immediately shut up. "Let's do it like this. This matter ends here." Yun Luohong made a decision. His expression was as cold and indifferent as before, but when he made this decision, an indescribable sense of frustration surged in his heart. He was just a peak 8th stage great emperor from the ancient path of the stars, but he had caused the 4 eastern imperial clans to suffer heavy casualties, and they had no choice but to give up on the pursuit. This was indeed too shameful. If this matter spread out, the prestige of the 4 eastern imperial clans would suffer a heavy blow, and they were destined to become the laughingstock of the eternal true world. But there was no other way. There was really no other way. When they truly fought against Lin Sun, they realized how terrifying and heaven-defying he was. He was so strong that even the Emperor Ancestor's heart palpitated in fear. Lin Sun did not know that the Gu clan and the Yun clan had already given up on the idea of continuing to chase after him. At that moment, he appeared in the depths of a golden desert filled with blue immortal fog. After instructing Xiaowu to set up the formation, Lin Sun immediately sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. He swallowed bottles of rare spirit pills and medicines in one go. In the previous battle, He had used up a lot of his energy, and he urgently needed to recover. However, this battle had also given Lin Sun an extremely generous reward. On the message talisman, there were 18 more battle achievements. In total, he had 21 battle achievements. Apart from that, the treasures and cultivation resources that Li Henshui and the others carried also became Lin Sun's spoils of war. Their value was so great that it was impossible to estimate. And the most attractive thing to Lin Sun was undoubtedly the statue suppressed in the abyssal sword cauldron. Less than half a foot high, it sat cross-legged, and its whole body showed a kind of dark color. The face of the statue was simple and unsophisticated. Its eyes were closed tightly, and its expression seemed to be smiling and crying. Its hands were clasped together on its abdomen, forming a strange handprint, giving people a strange and mysterious atmosphere. Lin Sun now knew that this was a statue made from the remains of an immortal figure. It was well preserved, and could be called a real immortal body. It was said that such remains had been soaked and tempered by the immortal power for many years, and could already be called a kind of immortal substance. After all, this was the remains of an immortal figure, and although this statue was only half a foot high, it was equivalent to condensing the power of the immortal golden body to the extreme. For anyone, it could be called a supreme treasure. Even if it was seen by an immortal figure, they would fight madly for it. At the same time, Lin Sun also noticed that in this statue, there was an unimaginably strong will power. What Li Henshui tried his best to awaken was this will power. Lin Sun had no doubt that if the immortal statue was awakened at that time, it could absolutely kill him easily. Because it was too powerful. It was far beyond Lin Sun's understanding of immortal figures. Unfortunately, such a treasure was not something that Lin Sun could use. Because to awaken the willpower, it needed the power of the bloodline of the Li clan, and outsiders could not activate it at all. But Lin Sun did not care about this. In his eyes, this immortal statue was a huge treasure made of immortal substance, which could be used as nourishment to refine the abyssal sword cauldron. As for the silent will power, it would also be refined along with the immortal statue, and then gradually obliterated by the abyssal sword cauldron, and there was no possibility for it to recover. Several hours later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation, and his breath had recovered to the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm. There are less than 2 days left. Lin Sun stood up, and after thinking for a while, he decided to continue. Now there was only the power of the Gu clan and the Yun clan left, and he intended to take advantage of these 2 days to destroy them in one go. Chapter 26:32. Lin Sun's character had always been one of those who didn't offend him. If someone offended him, sorry, no matter who you were or where you came from, a tooth for a tooth, blood for blood. In addition to Gu clan and Yun clan, Lin Sun also had some other enemies in mind, such as Wen, Heng, Luo, Zhu, and other immortal emperor clans. These forces had made a declaration in Chaotian City that as long as Lin Sun dared to appear in the battlefield of gods, they would kill him without mercy. Lin Sun would not be polite to them. Others were not afraid of tickles because they had too many lice, but he was fearless because he had too many enemies. Clang! Lin Sun flicked his finger, and the abyssal sword cauldron rang out. The next moment, he had disappeared in the vast desert. Be careful, there is only a day left, we must not be careless. In a valley. When Baidu reminded, as for the battle record, as long as you can survive, you can enter the 3rd level. He was an extremely senior emperor ancestor in the Wen clan. Beside him, there were several clansmen of the Wen clan who could not help but nod when they heard this. They had been hiding here for a long time. Even if they were discovered, when they saw such a lineup, ordinary people would not dare to act rashly. Elder, I heard that Lin Sun is being chased by the 3 great forces of Gu clan, Yun clan, and Li clan. This time, he will definitely not be able to escape, a man said with a smile, his eyes full of schadenfreude. Suddenly, an indifferent voice rang out in the sky above the valley. In my opinion, you will really not be able to escape this time. The voice was not loud, but it clearly resounded in the ears of Wenbaidu and the others, causing their expressions to change. Looking up, they saw a tall figure standing in the sky above the valley, his black hair fluttering like an immortal. Lin Sun. Wenbaidu and the others were shocked, and they almost could not believe their eyes. Wasn't this guy being chased by the three immortal forces? Let's go. Wenbaidu reacted the fastest, and immediately sent a message, intending to leave with the people around him. But at this moment, Lin Sun attacked without hesitation. Boom! The abyssal sword cauldron glowed, and millions of rays of light circulated, enveloping the entire canyon. Lin Sun's figure flashed, and the 5 Tao forms and himself teleported in the air to kill Wenbaidu and the others. The whole process took no more than 30 seconds. The battle came to an end. Wenbaidu and all the other clansmen of the one clan had been annihilated, and the mountains and rivers in the vicinity of a few thousand kilometers had transformed into withered ruins that seemed like they'd been destroyed. Whoosh! The divine rainbow transformed by Lin Sun flew away. Time flew by. In the remaining time, Lin Sun's figure traversed the vast lands of the Great Void Immortal Realm, patrolling along the way. He was like a soundless shadow, and even if some cultivators noticed him, they would only be able to catch a glimpse of him before vanishing without a trace. However, all along the way, bloody scenes had occurred successively, and cultivators from various powers had perished. For example, the Heng family, Luo family, Zhu family. In contrast, these undying forces that control the Earth Order and occupy the sixth heaven are far inferior to the 4 East Imperial clans in terms of both number and overall strength. The threat that this brought to Lin Sun was also much smaller, and he was not lenient in killing them, nor did he show any mercy. In less than a day, the number of enemies killed by Lin Sun along the way had reached more than 20, and the battle record on the message talisman in his hand had reached 43. This series of actions couldn't be concealed at all. Very quickly, it attracted the attention of countless experts and caused them to tremble. Did the alliance of the 3 East Imperial clans fail? Only then did many people realize that the situation was not right. Lin Sun had launched an unscrupulous killing spree. Did this mean that the assassination against him had been declared a failure? This guy is too ruthless. Those who have fallen are all from the forces that have enmity with him. Some people were bitterly disappointed. They saw through Lin Sun's intentions and were shocked by Lin Sun's ruthless means of revenge. In the vast Great Void Immortal Realm, no one can suppress this person? Someone let out a sorrowful cry, and he felt rather uncomfortable in his heart. All those that were able to enter the Grand Hunt were overlord-level existences that looked down upon all before them. But now, none of these overlords could suppress Lin Sun's arrogance. Don't worry, people like us who have no enmity with Lin Sun are safe for the time being, someone comforted his companions. At the same time, Lin Sun frowned. He had found the traces of the Gu clan and the Yun clan, but found that it was difficult to find a chance to attack. The strength of the 2 great forces acted together, and with Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong in charge, they were completely invulnerable. If he took the initiative to fight, Lin Sun was confident that he could inflict heavy casualties on the other side, but at the same time, he was afraid that he would also pay a heavy price. This kind of lose-lose approach was rejected by Lin Sun. After all, this was the Great Void Immortal Realm. If the 3 days of hunting did not end, they could not leave this place. This also meant that once he was injured, if he was intercepted and attacked while escaping, the consequences would be absolutely unimaginable. Lin Sun had deliberately revealed his traces in an attempt to lure the cultivators of the Gu clan and the Yun clan to attack. As long as they caught up, he would do the same, splitting them up and defeating them one by one. Who would have thought that even when he revealed his traces, the 2 immortal emperor clans only put on a defensive and alert formation, and did not intend to take the initiative to attack at all. Obviously, they had already realized the danger, and did not intend to give Lin Sun any chance to take advantage of them. This inevitably made Lin Sun feel a little helpless. Just as Lin Sun was hesitating whether to continue chasing, he suddenly turned over his palm, and a crystal-clear jade talisman like a green willow leaf appeared. Immediately after, a clear and melodious voice came from the jade talisman, revealing anxiety and panic. "Brother Lin, please save my uncle. He's dying." The voice was mixed with a trace of choking. This was the voice of Xiang Xiaoyuan. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly shrank. The green willow leaf jade talisman was given to him by Xiang Xiaoyuan before he entered the god's relic. Yuduqiu also had one. At this moment, Xiang Xiaoyuan was asking for help. Obviously, her uncle Lu Xiangque was in grave danger and could die at any time. Otherwise, with Xiang Xiaoyuan's temperament, she would not be so panicked and anxious. Lu Xiangque is the emperor ancestor of the Xiang Lu clan in the seventh heaven. His status is so high that he isn't below Nan Yongqiang, Gu Banzwang, Li Henshui, and the others. In the great void immortal domain, who would dare to attack such an existence? Lin Sun could not help but be surprised. He originally thought that in this world, only a barefooted person like him would dare to deal with the immortal emperor clans in the seventh heaven without any scruples. But who would have thought that besides him, there was another strong person who dared to do so? This made Lin Sun infer that the opponent who could force Lu Xiangque into such a dangerous situation was definitely not a simple person. This made him immediately think of Tsang Fusheng's warning. In the great void immortal realm, there was no lack of strong people more terrifying than the four eastern imperial clans. As he pondered, Lin Sun had already started to move. The green willow leaf jade talisman trembled slightly, emitting waves of power to guide him. This guy actually gave up? Far away, Gu Banzwang, Yun Luohong and the others who had been vigilant all noticed Lin Sun's movements. They could not help but feel surprised. "He must be afraid." Someone sneered, full of pride. "Idiot." Gu Banzwang glared at him. "There are so many of us, but we are being held back and threatened by him alone. Do you think someone like him would be afraid? In the future, use your brain when you say such things." That person was instantly embarrassed and did not dare to speak. Yun Luohong said, "No matter what, we should still be careful. Until the end of the hunt, we must not split up." Everyone agreed with these words. Lin Sun was too terrifying. So terrifying that if they dared to split up, there would be a disaster. In an expanse of ruined mountains and rivers, Lu Xiangque coughed up blood ceaselessly. His figure was in tatters, and he was on the verge of death. However, he was still fighting. But anyone could discern that he could not hold on for much longer. His opponent was a robust and strong man. His upper body revealed bronze skin, his bald head was shiny, his face was handsome, and his gaze revealed a ferocious aura. On his bright and clean forehead, there was a demonic blood-colored iris flower totem imprinted on it. Along with his attack, dazzling blood-colored lightning surged through the heavens and the earth. It was like countless blood-colored iris flowers were in full bloom and intended to swallow his enemies. His might was ferocious, domineering, and peerlessly fierce. He was clearly only at the peak of the 8th level of perfection, yet he actually suppressed an emperor ancestor like Lu Xiangque all along the way, and he pursued and attacked fiercely. There were 2 men and a woman standing far away from the battlefield. One of them wore a golden dress, had a slender waist, and had a simple and elegant bearing. From the beginning until the end, she didn't even spare a glance at the battle. She held a yellowed scroll in her hand and was reading it calmly. Her eyes were gentle, and she was quiet, as if the battle was far less attractive than the scroll in her hand. At that moment, her eyes were fixed on the scroll, but she said, "Qing Fu, that's about enough. After all, that's an old man from Lu Xiangque. You can't bully him too ruthlessly. If you really want to play, once we return to the eternal true world, I'll help you choose a few opponents to play with. When the bald handsome young man called Ching Fu heard the woman's words, even though he was slightly unwilling, he still obediently withdrew his hand. He grinned disdainfully at Lu Xiangchue, who was about to die, and said, "You've lived for a long time, but you were beaten up like a dog. If I were you, I would have slit my throat and committed suicide a long time ago. Enough with the nonsense. In terms of age, that old man is of the same generation as your grandfather. Don't be too ruthless, or else if Lu Xiangchue gets serious, I'll have to explain things to my family." The long-robed woman was still reading her book. She did not even raise her head, and her words were indifferent. But Ching Fu did not dare to say another word. He touched his bald head and left the battlefield while laughing. At the same time, a man in black clothes beside the long-robed woman cast his gaze towards his feet. With a gentle smile, he said softly, "Miss, have your reinforcements not arrived yet?" There was a person under his feet. Toward Little Garden. P.S. I'll add more updates tonight. Requesting monthly votes. Chapter 2633. On the ground. Xiang Xiaoyuan's delicate and fair face sunk into the dark brown ground. Her eyes were filled with sorrow, worry, and anger. The large foot stepped on her slender back, and it was filled with an unshakable and domineering force that completely suppressed her. This was a confinement full of great humiliation. He will come, he will. Xiang Xiaoyuan's lips were bleeding, soaking the ground. Her eyes were full of determination. The man in black who was stepping into the garden sighed. His voice was still as gentle as before. "We don't have much time to waste. Miss, I'll give you a choice. Either you die or your uncle dies. You decide. Just kill him directly. Why go through so much trouble?" The bald handsome man, Ching Fu, walked over and looked at Xiang Xiaoyuan, who was trampled on the ground. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of pity. Such a beautiful girl, but she's being trampled on like this. Even my heart aches when I see her. His voice was sarcastic and sarcastic. "Xiaoyuan." In the distance, Lu Xiangchue, who was seriously injured and bathed in blood, rushed over. His eyes were bloodshot, like a beast that lost control due to rage. Grasshopper's eyes flashed fiercely. "Old senior, I've already spared your life. Do you still want to die?" Before his voice died away, he casually punched. Bang! Lu Xiangchue was instantly sent flying. His body cracked and many bones were broken. His injuries were so severe that he couldn't even get up from the ground. "Let Xiaoyuan go. I'll accompany you to the end," Lu Xiangchue hissed. Grasshopper grinned and ignored him. The man in black looked at the woman in a long dress who was holding a scroll and studying it seriously. The latter raised her head helplessly and glanced at the man in black. "Why do I always have to make the decision?" The man in black smiled warmly and said, "Well, I'll send this girl on her way as long as you don't blame me for only bullying women." The woman in a long dress couldn't help smiling. A trace of playfulness appeared on her plain and elegant face. "Aren't you worried that Lin Sun will come to avenge this girl?" The dark-clothed man thought about it seriously and said, "Then what should I do? Could it be that I have to worship this young lady, kneel on the ground, kowtow, and apologize and repent with tears and snot?" At the end of his sentence, he couldn't help but laugh. You look like a gentle person, but you have a heart of stone. Even Green Grasshopper is more like a human than you." The woman in the long dress shook her head and looked at the scroll in her hand again. "I'll wait for another 7 minutes at most. You can think about how to solve this yourself." The black-robed man nodded. Looking at Xiang Xiaoyuan at his feet, he said in a gentle voice, "Miss, don't worry. You still have half an hour to live." How boring. If it was me, I would definitely not waste my time like this. I would just kill him with a single punch. As Ching Fu spoke, she couldn't help but glance at the man behind the woman in the long dress. He was wearing plain cotton clothes and had been silent the whole time. He was very clean from head to toe, and his long hair was neatly combed. However, he wasn't handsome and looked a bit mediocre. Even his breath was almost non-existent. Standing next to the woman in the long dress, it was easy to ignore him. But when Ching Fu looked at him, there was a trace of unconcealable fear in his eyes, as well as a trace of eagerness to fight. But in the end, he resisted the thought of testing the man in the plain clothes. He didn't dare to act rashly. Otherwise, he suspected that he would be killed with a single punch. From beginning to end, the man in the plain clothes didn't even look at him. But Ching Fu didn't care. He knew that in the eyes of the man in the plain clothes, not only him, but also the black-clothed man, the only person that the man in the plain clothes really cared about was the elegant woman in the long dress. "Miss, there's only 7 minutes left. If you have any last words, why don't you tell me? Maybe I'll be kind and help you build a monument or something." Ching Fu was bored, so he squatted on the ground and asked with a smile. Then he stretched out his hand to pinch Xiang Xiaoyuan's face. "If you don't say anything, I'll tear your tempting little mouth." "Whose mouth do you want to tear?" A slightly abrupt voice resounded out in this expanse of the heavens and the earth, and it revealed a strand of indifferent coldness that caused one's heart to palpitate. Ching Fu's hand stopped, and he turned around to look. The black-clothed man who stepped on Xiang Xiaoyuan's body raised his brows and smiled warmly. "Looks like he really cares about you. Next, let's see if he's able to save you alive, or if both of you die together." As he spoke, he raised his head and looked over as well. On the other hand, the woman in the long dress was still reading, and she seemed to be engrossed in the book. The man in the plain clothes by her side was still silent as before, and his ordinary face was like an iceberg that wouldn't melt for eternity, without the slightest emotion. In the distance, a tall figure appeared out of thin air, and it entered into the eyes of Ching Fu and the black-clothed man, causing them to reveal expressions of interest. Ching Fu's gaze was unbridled. The gaze of the black-clothed man carried a faint smile instead. It was a smile that was cold and indifferent to the extreme, and it was like the joy of waiting for his prey. The person that arrived was precisely Lin Sun. He frowned slightly as he looked at Lu Xiangchue, who was heavily injured to the point he was unable to stand up. On the other hand, when he saw Xiang Xiaoyuan, who was stepped on by the black-clothed man, his eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and a cold light flashed within them. "Brother Lin, don't worry about me. Quickly take my uncle and leave." Xiang Xiaoyuan spoke anxiously. She knew too well how terrifying these people were. Each of them was more heaven-defying than the other, and they were terrifying to the point of causing others to feel despair. Swoosh! Ching Fu's figure flashed and appeared by Lu Xiangchue's side, and he similarly stepped on Lu Xiangchue while crossing his arms before his chest. His gaze carried an undisguised provocation as he looked at Lin Sun and said, "No matter if you've come to give your life away or to save someone, you have to pass through me first." He raised his thumb and pointed at himself with a ferocious gaze, and he was extremely arrogant. The blood-red iris pattern on his forehead was devilish and terrifying. "There's still me." The black-clothed man smiled warmly. "We've all heard of your name and know your origins. But no matter if it's me or Ching Fu, we don't believe that anyone in this world can break through the natural chasm of the ancestor realm while at the peak of the 8th level." Lin Sun went silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled lightly and said, "So you've come for me? You can say that." Ching Fu's eyes were ferocious and playful. "How about it? Do you dare to play? As long as you can defeat me, I'll let go of this senior who was beaten like a dog by me." Lu Xiangchue was furious, but he obviously tried his best to suppress it. He tried hard to calm himself down and said in a hoarse voice, "My young friend, you should leave quickly. It's an extremely stupid thing for Xiang Xiaoyuan to ask for help. You can't get involved in this matter, otherwise." Before he finished his words, he let out a muffled groan as his spine was crushed by Ching Fu's foot. "How about it? Do you dare? Give me a straightforward answer, Ching Fu grinned and said. Lin Sun also smiled and spat out 2 words from his lips, okay. He lifted his foot and took a step. It was a light step without any order. But at this time, the woman in the long skirt who was reading a book suddenly said, Ching Fu, be careful. Those who were familiar with Lin Sun might know what it meant when he made such a decision. Those opponents who had died in Lin Sun's hands should know how terrifying Lin Sun was at this moment. In an instant, the void in front of Lin Sun broke into a straight crack silently, and Lin Sun had already appeared in front of Ching Fu like a swift light. Ching Fu was indeed a ferocious person who had experienced killing for a long time. His face slightly changed. He exerted all the strength in his body and punched out an extremely fierce punch, trying to block Lin Sun's sudden attack. Lin Sun didn't dodge and let the punch hit him. His big hand, like a cage that covered the sky, covered the fist. Bang! Ching Fu's punch hit Lin Sun, but it couldn't break Lin Sun's defense. Instead, the fierce punch was crushed and obliterated inch by inch. This made Ching Fu realize something was wrong at the first moment. His face changed again and he was about to change his move. Lin Sun's palm had already covered Grasshopper's face. The force of his palm broke Grasshopper's defense like a hot knife cutting through butter. Then, Lin Sun grabbed Grasshopper's neck and lifted him into the air. There was no other reason. Compared to killing Ching Fu with one blow, Lin Sun was more worried that Ching Fu would counterattack and kill Lu Xiangxue under his feet. Therefore, Lin Sun trapped Ching Fu at the first moment. At this time, Lin Sun carried Green Grasshopper, who was ferocious and had severely injured Emperor ancestor Lu Xiangxue, as if he was carrying a chick. The terrifying and unparalleled power of suppression was simply shocking and completely beyond the imagination of everyone present. Ching Fu's handsome face turned red and twisted, and his eyes were full of horror. It seemed that he couldn't believe that there was someone in this world who could capture him with one blow. Little Baldy, how dare you play with me? Lin Sun looked indifferent, and his deep eyes were full of sarcasm. In the distance, the woman in the long dress holding the yellowed scroll was stunned. Even she, who was calm and indifferent, showed such an expression at this moment, not to mention the others. The warm smile on the face of the man in black, who stepped on Xiang Xiaoyuan, gradually disappeared. At this moment, he revealed the coldness hidden deep in his heart. My friend, if you don't let go, you will admit your fate. The man in black narrowed his eyes and reminded Lin Sun seriously. Okay. Lin Sun said with a smile. I can keep his life first. But since he provoked me and hurt me before, he has to pay the price. Crack, crack, crack. Before his voice died away, Ching Fu's bones were shattered inch by the power of Lin Sun's shaking hand, making a dense sound of bones breaking. Ching Fu was paralyzed like a noodle. Suffering such a cruel injury, Ching Fu was really cruel. He gritted his teeth and didn't say a word. Only his fierce eyes were bloodshot, and he stared at Lin Sun with hatred. Bang! Lin Sun didn't even look at him. He threw Ching Fu at his feet like throwing rubbish. Then he looked at the man in black and asked, Are you sure you want me to go through you? There was silence, and the atmosphere was so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. More updates. Chapter 2634. The black-clothed man's foot was still firmly planted on Xiang Xiaoyuan's body, but his gentle expression had already turned grave. Especially when he was stared at by Lin Sun, the silent disdain and coldness made the dignity of the man in black feel the most direct provocation. The elegant and calm woman in a long dress holding a yellowish scroll said, In my opinion, we'd better take a step back and make peace. The man in black twitched his lips slightly and said with a wry smile, Miss, can you not shake the morale of the army at this time? He rubbed his face with both hands and then took a long breath. When he looked at Lin Sun, his eyes had become as sharp as a cold blade, and there was a terrible killing intent surging in his pupils like a whirlpool. The woman in the long dress shook her head helplessly and said no more. She knew that if the man in black didn't pass this hurdle, there would be a problem in his state of mind. The heart of cultivation had always been subtle. This was especially true for those cultivators who were decisive in killing and advancing bravely. It seemed to be a retreat that was meant to appease trouble and keep the peace. But it was very likely to mean fear, which would damage the spirit that had been honed for countless years. In particular, if he gave in before the real fight, he would take it to heart every time he thought of it in the future, which would become a mental obstacle. Therefore, the woman in the long dress didn't persuade him much. It didn't matter if he did as he pleased, or if his heart was as firm as iron and indestructible. Different people's state of mind was different after all. "You have to pass this hurdle," the man in black said, showing a gentle smile like spring breeze to Lin Sun. His momentum had changed. He was as lofty as a mountain and as sharp as a blade. Even the smile like spring breeze couldn't hide his sharpness. Lin Sun looked at him calmly. He just pointed to Xiang Xiaoyuan, who was stepped on by the man in black, and said, "If something happens to her, I promise you won't die easily." It was a very plain sentence, but the meaning in it made the man in black laugh. He said, "Don't worry. I, Shui Chongjing, have never disdained to threaten my opponent with other means in battle since I started my cultivation." His words were filled with arrogance towards his own cultivation. With a flick of his toes, Xiang Xiaoyuan was kicked into the air and flew towards Lin Sun. Lin Sun was about to reach out his hand to catch Xiang Xiaoyuan. At the same time, Shui Zhongjing's figure suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in front of Lin Sun, clenched his fist and punched at Lin Sun. Boom! This punch was dazzling and resplendent. It seized all creation and displayed the profundities of the Grand Tao, and various Grand Tao profundities were fused within it. As this punch struck out, it was like the Heaven Tao was pressing down. Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged. He held Xiang Xiaoyuan with his left hand at the first time, and his right hand turned into a circle as if he was holding Tai Chi, but the image of a dark and nameless abyss emerged. An earth-shattering collision sound suddenly resounded. The nearby void rumbled and collapsed. The ground cracked and mud flew everywhere. Immediately after, the vast mountains and rivers nearby suddenly collapsed. Countless rocks and plants were turned into ashes. Lin Sun took a step back. However, before he could stabilize himself, the dark-clothed man's second punch had already arrived, and it was swift like a thunderclap that shook the 9 heavens. Surging laws of the Grand Tao poured out like a waterfall within the force of his punch, and it faintly seemed as if the images of the gods had charged out from within the force of his punch with the intention of obliterating the world. This fist was matchless and matchless. Even the woman in the long dress in the distance couldn't help but nod secretly. In the deafening sound of the collision, Lin Sun was shaken to take a step back again. He had fallen into a passive position in the first punch, and the dark-clothed man had seized the initiative. Moreover, he had to protect Xiang Xiaoyuan with his left hand, so he had become much more passive. But even so, when Lin Sun blocked this matchless punch, it still surprised the dark-clothed man a little. In his expectation, even if the power of this punch couldn't kill Lin Sun, it wouldn't be a problem to injure him. However, this situation didn't happen. This made the dark-clothed man more aware of Lin Sun's strength. Without hesitation, he seized the initiative and struck the third punch, the fourth punch, the fifth punch without hesitation. Every punch had the power to shake the sky and destroy mountains and rivers, and it was enough to make those peak 8th-level emperors in the world despair and unable to resist it. Along with the dark-clothed man's continuous attacks, before the might of every single punch was completely dispersed, the next punch would strike down once more. It was like a ceaselessly overlapping ocean wave that piled up layer by layer and pushed up without end, and its might rose without end as well. Under such swift, and terrifying attacks, Lin Sun's figure was ceaselessly shaken and moved back without end. The nearby heavens, earth, mountains, and rivers collapsed and shattered along with this, and it transformed into a terrifying scene of destruction. The peerless force of the punches swept out, and it even gave others the misconception that the heavens and the earth were overturned. When he struck out for the 9th punch, the might that ceaselessly overlapped and rose had already arrived at a world-shocking state, and it caused the 9 heavens to be shocked and all things to collapse. 9-wave overlapping force. This was the strongest technique possessed by the dark-clothed man. Every single punch from before had been accumulated for the sake of this 9th punch, and it accumulated the strength to erupt in the end. The profundities of the 9 levels of the punch converged together would release an unprecedentedly terrifying and lethal strike. Defeat! Right at this moment, a sharp light flashed in the dark-clothed man's eyes, and he revealed a brilliant and dazzling smile. Bang! The fist force that had been accumulated to the extreme suddenly broke out at this moment. In an instant it was as if 100,000 volcanoes erupted at the same time, and the power released completely drowned this world. The terrifying torrent raged and swept, and wherever it passed, everything turned into ashes. Nothing seemed to be able to resist the power of this punch. When the light rain was still diffusing and the turbulence was still continuing, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. "Have you had enough fun?" The bright smile on the face of the dark-clothed man suddenly froze, and his pupils widened. He was shocked uncontrollably in his heart. "It's my turn to attack." That indifferent voice resounded once more, and then a tall figure walked out of thin air amidst the surging and monstrous rain of light. His clothes fluttered with the wind, and he was completely unharmed. Moreover, his entire body was coiled by a circle of light that was like an abyss, and it seemed as if he was impenetrable by all techniques. The dark-clothed man felt a strong fear in his heart. How could this be possible? Retreat! The voice of the woman in the long dress sounded in the distance. But it was already a step too late. Lin soon stepped forward and came to the front of the dark-clothed man in an instant. Like a ray of light, he cut through the ages and flashed in the world at an incredible speed. He waved his hand and punched. It was just an understated palm, without a trace of smoke and fire. But the dark-clothed man used all his potential to fight against Lin Sun as if he was facing a formidable enemy. Bang! The next moment, like an ant trying to shake a tree, he was thrown away by Lin Sun's palm. His hair was disheveled and his figure staggered. The void collapsed and exploded. Before he could stand firm, Lin Sun's figure had already arrived. He reached out his hand and grabbed the man's ankle. Like picking up a wooden stake, he smashed the man hard on the ground. Bang! A hole was smashed in the ground and the ground cracked. In the smoke and dust, the dark-clothed man's face was swollen and he coughed up blood. He let out a muffled groan and his eyes flashed fiercely. He tried to break free from Lin Sun's big hand with a secret method. But to his horror, it didn't help at all. The peerless cultivation that he was proud of was completely powerless in front of Lin Sun. The next moment, he was swung up by Lin Sun and smashed down hard. His skin and flesh were torn, and many bones were broken. It was so miserable. The woman in the long dress in the distance narrowed her eyes, as if she couldn't bear to see it. "Is it fun to step on a woman?" Lin Sun asked with deep and indifferent eyes. As he spoke, he shook his wrist, and the black-clothed man hit the ground with his head again. His neck was almost broken, and the nearby ground was shaken to the point that it completely collapsed. It could be imagined how terrible the force was. The black-clothed man was already beyond recognition. His whole body was broken, and blood kept flowing out. He saw stars in front of his eyes. It seemed that he had been beaten silly and was dying. In the distance, Ching Fu, whose bones were broken by Lin Sun, couldn't help but gasp at this moment. His fierce eyes couldn't help showing fear at this moment. He knew very well how powerful the black-clothed man was, but he was abused like a chicken or a dog by Lin Sun. That scene gave him goosebumps all over. "Do you want me to strip you naked and hang you upside down in front of Chaotian City to show the world?" Lin Sun asked with a smile. Xiang Xiaoyuan was his friend, but he had been trampled by this man before. That humiliating scene also aroused Lin Sun's killing intent. Lin Sun lifted the black-clothed man and was about to smash him. In the distance, the slightly mediocre man who had been standing silently beside the woman in the long skirt finally couldn't help rushing over. After all, the black-clothed man was on their side. He couldn't be killed in front of them like this. Lin Sun looked up at the man in the long skirt who was rushing over. He shook off the black-clothed man who was about to die, took a deep breath, and rushed forward. As early as he arrived in the field, he had noticed that the woman in the long skirt might be the most distinguished one, but the man in the long skirt was the most dangerous one. Whoosh! The man in the long skirt walked calmly. He seemed to be slow, but in fact he was extremely fast. His slightly mediocre face was calm, but when he took action, it was like a sword coming out of a silent box. Indescribable, horrible breath rushed out of his body, tearing the sky and penetrating all directions. He was like a king of emperors patrolling the world. He just raised his hand, made a seal with his 5 fingers, and pressed it in the void. Boom! The heavens and the earth were like fragile glass that blasted apart with a bang. A green-colored palm print flashed out, and it was crystalline and translucent. It revealed a perfect and invulnerable feeling. All the sharpness, all the Taoist techniques, were contained within this palm print. As for Lin Sun, he also released all his cultivation at this moment and punched out a punch that was like an abyss or a cauldron, vast and chaotic. The collision of the two was like a battle between two gods. The world was completely destroyed by the torrent of destruction like a piece of paper. All the scenes showed a great collapse and chaos. If it happened in the outside world, this blow alone could destroy a world. Until the smoke and dust dispersed, a figure stood in the void like a holy mountain, majestically fluctuating. Only his robe and long hair fluttered in the wind. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes at this moment. It was the man in the long skirt. In the far distance there was also a figure standing. However, when she saw this figure was also intact, the woman in the long skirt holding the scroll showed a rare change of expression. Chapter 26:35. The tall figure was like an immortal, ethereal, and otherworldly. When he stood in the air, he gave off a feeling that he could suppress everything. The woman in the long dress gripped the yellowed scroll in her hand, a thoughtful look in her eyes. It was also the first time that she showed a serious look since Lin Sun arrived. In the distance, Grasshopper was completely stunned. In his eyes, the linen-robed man was an invincible being. In the eternal world, he was a ferocious emperor, so strong that he was unreasonable. There were many times when Grasshopper couldn't help but suspect that he could smash him to pieces with just a casual strike. But now, the linen-robed man's attack had been blocked, and Lin Sun was unharmed. This fact was like an incomparably heavy blow to Qing Fu, completely shocking her. The black-robed man, who had just escaped death, had been filled with indignation and anger when Lin Sun grabbed him and beat him. But now, his eyes were wide open and he was in a daze. "You're only in the 8th tier of ultimate talent, yet you can shake me. Looks like the rumors are true." In the silent atmosphere, the linen-robed man stared at Lin Sun and spoke. This was the first time he had spoken during this period of time, and his voice was as heavy as steel. There was surprise in his eyes, as well as a fighting spirit that had been stirred up. "Should I still feel honored after hearing what you said?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows, and a serious look appeared in his eyes. The previous strike had allowed him to determine that the seemingly mediocre linen-robed man in front of him was an ultimate talent great ancestor. This was the second ultimate talent great ancestor Lin Sun had met. The other one was Yun Muzha from the 7th heaven. But strictly speaking, this was the first time Lin Sun had fought against an ultimate talent great ancestor. His unparalleled power was indeed monstrous and dangerous. Compared to the ancestor of a Tao in the ordinary sense, it was a world of difference. In the eternal world, I've only heard that there are people like you among the eternal gods who can surpass the natural chasm of progenitors. But this is just a rumor, and no one can confirm whether it's true or not," the linen-robed man said. "However, your appearance proves that the rumors are not baseless. I'll give you a chance. As long as you can last 15 minutes against me, I'll ask the young miss to spare your lives." 15 minutes. This was a declaration of war from one of the great ancestors. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he smiled emotionlessly. "I'm just worried that these will be your last words." The cloth-clothed man was unmoved and said, "I've never feared death." His eyes were completely calm. "Lin Feng, come back. There's no need to continue this battle." In the extreme distance, the woman in a long dress spoke, and her expression was tranquil as before. The linen-clothed man called Lin Feng was silent for a moment before he turned around and returned. Such a divine emperor ancestor actually listened to the long-dressed woman's words. Lin Sun was a little surprised. "Let's call it a day. What do you think?" The woman in the long skirt looked at Lin Sun and asked in a clear voice. Lin Sun laughed and said, "Do you think the trouble you caused will end like this? In other words, if I didn't come this time, my friend and the elder would have been tortured to death by you." If he really fought with all his strength, he was sure that he could kill the man named Lin Feng, but he would inevitably pay a heavy price. After all, he was a peerless great ancestor, far more powerful than an ordinary great ancestor. What's more, it was impossible for such a person to not have some powerful trump cards. But Lin Sun didn't want to think about it. He only knew that what happened to Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xiaoyuan was caused by him, so he should be the one to avenge them. "You're courting death," Qing Fu couldn't help saying. He couldn't believe that Lin Sun was so confident to pursue this matter. "Qing Fu, come here," the woman in the long skirt said. Qing Fu was stunned, but he still walked over and said, "Miss, did I say something wrong again?" The woman in the long skirt shook her head. "I saved your life because you are the one I chose, but your previous performance disappointed me." Qing Fu's heart trembled, and he said, "Miss, as long as I seize the opportunity, I will definitely have a chance to prove the great ancestor." Crack! As soon as he finished speaking, his neck was twisted and broken. In an instant, Qing Fu's pupils opened wide and revealed an expression of disbelief. At the instant before his death, he finally saw clearly that the person who killed him was the man in plain clothes, Lin Feng. But he was utterly unable to figure out why Lin Feng wanted to kill him. Bang! In the next moment, Qing Fu transformed into ash that scattered into the air. The dark-clothed man who was heavily injured and on the verge of death shivered. He was shocked by this cruel scene, and he similarly felt bewildered and indescribable terror. Why? He didn't dare ask, as he was deeply afraid that he would suffer calamity if he did. "How about this?" The woman in the long skirt who held the scroll in her hand looked at Lin Sun. The death of an extremely ferocious and peerless 8th-level great emperor like Qing Fu seemed to be unable to arouse even a trace of emotion in her. After witnessing all of this, and then looking at the woman in the long skirt who was elegant like an orchid and had a composed bearing, a trace of coldness arose in Lin Sun's heart. This woman seemed to be graceful and quiet, yet she was actually an extremely ruthless figure. This kind of ruthlessness was a kind of indifference to the creatures in the world. Even the dazzling 8th-level great emperor. In her eyes, Qing Fu was also a figure who could kill others. "I'm curious, why did you do this?" Lin Sun asked. The woman in the long skirt smiled slightly and said, "He made me lose face. How about this reason?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, "Then why didn't you kill him too?" He looked at the black-clothed man, whose face suddenly became extremely ugly. He was so angry that he couldn't wait to eat Lin Sun alive. The woman in the long skirt said, "Although he was defeated, he still has the potential to become stronger in the future. I don't want to lose such a friend." The black-clothed man suddenly felt relieved, as if he had walked on the edge of death before. Friend. Lin Sun sneered. People like you are doomed to have no friends. Maybe. The woman in the long skirt answered casually, your strength has been recognized by me. If you want, I can take you to the 8th heaven for cultivation, and I can also provide you with resources to prove the peerless great emperor ancestor. Lin Sun was stunned and asked, do you think I will be willing? The woman in the long skirt looked at Lin Sun seriously and said, things in this world are unpredictable. To be honest, I never fail to get what I want. She continued, you can think about it carefully. If you haven't made a decision by the end of the God's relic, I can only help you make a decision. After that, she turned around and left, holding the scroll in one hand and the other hand behind her back. Her long skirt fluttered and she looked calm. The linen-clothed man, Lin Feng, followed closely behind. The black-clothed man walked at the end. But when he left, he glanced at Lin Sun with a complicated look, which was mixed with hatred and a trace of inexplicable jealousy. Lin Sun stood still and watched them leave. In the end, he didn't stop them. Not to mention the plain-clothed man, Lin Feng, even the woman in the long dress gave him an unfathomable feeling, and he even faintly felt a sense of danger. Lin Sun hadn't experienced this feeling for a long time. He knew clearly that this woman probably had the power to threaten him. The 8th heaven. It seems that she comes from an immortal force. Lin Sun thought and turned around to leave. On the bank of a huge lake that looked like a mirror made of green jade. Thank you, Brother Lin. Xiang Xiaoyuan said gratefully. She knew very well that if it wasn't for Lin Sun, she and Lu Xiangchua wouldn't have a chance to survive. Speaking of which, it's also because of me that you and Senior Lu Xiangchua were implicated, Lin Sun sighed softly. He took out some precious healing medicines and handed them to Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangchua. Young friend, don't say these words again. I, Lu Xiangchua, will never forget today's kindness. Lu Xiangchua sat cross-legged on the ground and was recuperating. Lin Sun shook his head and changed the topic. Senior, do you know the origin of those people? A trace of bitterness and fear flashed in Lu Xiangchua's eyes and he said, if I still can't recognize the identity of that woman, I will have lived in vain. Next, he told them about the origin of the woman in the long skirt. This woman's name is Qi Lingyun, and she comes from the Qi clan, one of the immortal giants of the 8th heaven. She is also a core member of the Qi clan. Her father is a supreme existence in the 8th heaven, possessing unimaginable monstrous power. Among the 10 immortal giants of the 8th heaven, the Qi clan can also be ranked in the top 3. Since ancient times, it has been rumored that the ancestor of the Qi clan was a divine child from the eternal god clan of the 9th heaven. As the daughter of the patriarch of the Qi clan, Qi Lingyun's identity is very special and extraordinary. After understanding this, Lin Sun finally understood why Lu Xiangchua only felt bitterness and fear after suffering such great humiliation. Even if he is an elder of the Lu Xiangchua in the 7th heaven, in the face of the daughter of an immortal giant in the 8th heaven, he is destined to swallow his anger and be unable to retaliate. Otherwise, he is afraid that the entire Lu Xiangchua will be implicated. In this regard, although Lin Sun doesn't agree with it, he also understands. After all, an elder like Lu Xiangchua must consider the safety of the clan before doing anything. As for Lin Feng, he is a legendary figure from an immortal emperor clan in the 5th heaven. A long time ago, before this person became an ancestor, he showed a dazzling light that shocked the entire 5th heaven. He was chosen by a great figure of the Qi clan and brought to the Qi clan of the 8th heaven to cultivate. Today, Lin Feng can be regarded as a member of the Qi clan, following Qi Lingyun and serving her. He seems to be a subordinate, but in the eyes of others, being able to cultivate in the Qi clan is like a carp leaping through the dragon gate, reaching the pinnacle of life. Even the Lin clan, which was originally located in the 5th heaven and could only be regarded as an ordinary immortal emperor clan, has been continuously expanding over the years because of Lin Feng. As the saying goes, when one person achieves the Tao, His chickens and dogs also rise to heaven. Chapter 26:36. As for Grasshopper and Shui Zhongjing, they were the elites chosen by Qi Lingyun. According to Lu Xiangchue, Grasshopper and Shui Zhongjing both came from the eternal world, especially Shui Zhongjing, who was a peerless figure from the sixth heaven. Both of them had been cultivating in Chaotian City for decades and had left their names on the Xian list. They were highly regarded by many powerful forces in the seventh heaven. But both of them refused. It wasn't until they won in the first round of the God's Relic that they were recruited by Qi Lingyun. They are naturally very happy to be able to enter the eighth heaven for cultivation, and they are extremely respectful to Qi Lingyun. After learning all this, Lin soon realized that Grasshopper and Shui Zhongjing were nothing more than talents that Qi Lingyun fancied. Lin soon still had one thing he didn't understand. How could Grasshopper beat you up so badly with his ability? Xiang Xiaoyuan said, Grasshopper doesn't have such ability. It was Lin Feng who attacked first and seriously injured my uncle, giving Grasshopper a chance. A wisp of hatred appeared between Xiang Xiaoyuan's brows when she spoke of Qing Fu. This disaster was completely caused by this person. He saw through my and uncle's identities and said that as long as he captured us, he would be able to force Brother Lin to show himself. At that time, we would be able to see if Brother Lin is as strong as the rumors say. These words aroused Qi Lingyun's interest, to the extent that he didn't finish his words, but his meaning was clear. Grasshopper may be the culprit, but Qi Lingyun can't get away with it either. No matter what, it's all because of me. Lin Sun's black eyes were terrifyingly cold. Brother Lin, don't fight with that woman. It's best not to provoke her. Xiang Xiaoyuan said hurriedly. That's right. The Qi clan is located in the 8th celestial region, and their might is so great that they can cover many of the celestial regions in Eternal True World. My young friend, you are traveling alone right now. There is simply no need for you to fall out with them. Lu Xiangke also tried to dissuade him. Lin Sun nodded and smiled. Don't worry, you two. I know what I'm doing. But Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangchue couldn't guess what they were thinking. In the following time, they began to meditate and heal their wounds, while Lin Sun strolled around the lake. It was already the third day of the great hunt. In a few more hours, this trial would come to an end. Lin Sun did not have to guess to know that the more it was like this, the crazier the fighting and killing in the Great Void Immortal Domain would be. But none of these could affect Lin Sun. Moreover, he didn't plan on hunting anymore. Up until now, he had already accumulated 43 kills through the message talisman. In the entire Great Void Immortal Realm, there were probably few who could match up to him. His only regret was that he did not have the chance to eliminate the experts of the Gu clan and the Yun clan. Time flew by. During this period of time, many cultivators who were in a frenzy of killing swept past this place. When they saw Lu Xiangchue and Xiang Xiaoyuan, who were meditating and recuperating, they were originally aggressive and thought that they had caught their prey. However, when they saw the tall figure that was strolling by the lake, they instantly felt their scalps go numb, and they turned around and left without daring to delay in the slightest. When they confirmed that the tall figure didn't chase after them, they couldn't help but feel fortunate, as if they'd survived a calamity. Who in the Great Void Immortal Realm didn't know Lin Sun's bloody and valiant record? It was no exaggeration to say that in the eyes of those cultivators, Lin Sun was the most dangerous person. As long as they were not stupid, no one was willing to face him head-on. Lin Sun fought head-on. This was the power of killing. Until a touch of night emerged above the sky of the Great Void Immortal Realm, the experts distributed in different areas all breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. This meant that 3 days had passed, and the second trial, the Great Hunt, was over. It's finally over. Lin Sun looked at Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangchue and said, You too, the third trial has begun. I'll go first. As soon as his voice fell, a star-like silver light fell from the sky, wrapped Lin Sun's whole body, and disappeared on the spot. Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xieyuan's silhouettes were also bathed in 2 rays of silver celestial light at this instant and disappeared. On the same platform, Lin Sun's figure emerged out of thin air. The vast field was filled with white mist, but there was the origin of Taoism, which had turned into a scroll and spread out. Buzz on his body, the talismans that recorded numerous records of military achievements flew out, buzzing and trembling in the void, as if they were sensing and summoning something. Lin Sun held his breath and waited calmly. Just like the first trial, after the end of the second trial, those with higher military achievements would get more generous rewards. Swish! It wasn't long before a peerlessly dazzling violet immortal light charged out from within the boundless white mist, and it revolved in space before transforming into a translucent and crystalline violet immortal sword. The sword was only the size of a palm, 2 fingers wide, and its blade was as bright and translucent as a crystal. There were 2 majestic immortal characters engraved on the sword, exterminating immortal. But looking closely, this sword was sealed by layers of mysterious immortal prohibitions, so that the aura it radiated was full of obscurity. Lin Sun's heart shook, and he raised his hand to summon it. Instantly, the purple immortal sword called Celestial Extermination fell into Lin Sun's hand, and a peerless icy cold killing intent spread in Lin Sun's palm. It was piercingly sharp, and it caused Lin Sun's body to stiffen abruptly. He operated his cultivation to counteract this killing intent. His black eyes lit up, and he realized that the reward this time was extremely extraordinary. It should be known that this sword was still in a sealed state, but the killing intent it overflowed with was so terrifying. It could be imagined how terrifying its true power would be when the seal was undone. However, when Lin Sun intended to break the seal, he was shocked to find that the layers of prohibitions actually contained traces of the aura of order, and it seemed extremely mysterious and terrifying. With his current strength, he was unable to comprehend its secrets, let alone break it. Even so, Lin Sun was still amazed in his heart. This sword needed to be sealed with the power of prohibitions filled with the aura of order, so how could it be compared to ordinary treasures? Celestial extermination, celestial extermination. For such a treasure to appear in the central immortal court, I'm afraid it's one of the few immortal weapons in the world of immortals. Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder if this celestial extermination sword that had survived from the last era was an immortal weapon. What about the others? What kind of rewards did they get? Will they also get such a miraculous treasure? Lin Sun seemed to be lost in thought. In fact, Lin Sun didn't know that his achievements were far higher than the second place, and he was the well-deserved first place in the Great Hunt battle. Therefore, he obtained the Celestial Extermination sword that had been sealed. This was also a supreme treasure hidden in the central immortal court, and in the world of immortals in the last era, it was enough to make any cultivator fight madly for it. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun intended to put the sword away, but he unexpectedly found that the sword actually produced a great repulsive force. The abyssal sword cauldron couldn't tolerate it, and this scene undoubtedly showed that this sword was even more extraordinary. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun opened his mouth and swallowed, and the sword turned into a ray of purple light that flowed into the imperial realm in his body. Buzz, as it was wrapped by the power of the Great Way in the imperial realm, the celestial extermination sword sprinkled a magnificent rain of purple light, like wisps of sharp sword light, which looked extremely magical. And Lin Sun also keenly noticed that the immortal prohibition seal on the sword showed a faint sign of being refined, but it was so subtle that it was almost imperceptible. This made him refreshed, and he realized that as long as he nurtured this sword, with the continuous improvement of his cultivation, he would be able to break the seal on the sword layer by layer. Interesting, a trace of a smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. Whoosh! The next moment, the platform under his feet shook, and Lin Sun disappeared. In the last era, the third stage of the Battle of the Chosen One was called Ascension. This was also the last stage. As long as one could walk out of the ascension, he could enter the central immortal court and obtain the supreme secret inheritance. With a flash of white light, Lin Sun had already appeared on a cliff platform halfway up the mountain. The cliff platform was so wide that it could accommodate tens of thousands of people. Immortal clouds were curling up, and divine light was flowing. On the top of the mountain above the cliff platform stood a grand and majestic palace, like the legendary heavenly court, which was bathed in endless Taoist light. Looking from afar, it gave people the feeling that it was the dwelling place of the gods, the central place of the universe, representing the supreme and supreme. Central Immortal Court. Lin soon recognized at a glance that this was the Central Immortal Court, which represented the supreme and unique place of immortals in the last era. It was the dominating place in the hearts of billions of cultivators in the 4,900 continents of the immortal world. Stay away. Be careful, merciless Lin is coming. There was a burst of whispers nearby. Lin soon glanced around and found many cultivators standing on the cliff platform. There were Gu Banzwang, Yun Luohong, and other people from the two immortal imperial clans, as well as some other familiar faces. Lin Sun even saw Qi Lingyun in a long dress, holding a scroll in her hand, Lin Feng in plain clothes, and Shui Zhongjing in black clothes. Along with his appearance on the cliff, it caused a wave of restlessness, and many cultivators subconsciously avoided him and kept a distance from him. There was fear and seriousness in their expressions, and they looked at Lin Sun as if he was a dreadful beast. Soon, Lin Sun saw Xiang Xiyuan and Lu Xiangchu. He nodded imperceptibly and withdrew his gaze. It was similar to the situation in the first stage. On the cliff platform, everyone's cultivation was suppressed by the power of the rules of heaven and earth, and they couldn't act rashly. To Lin Sun's surprise, only a little over 300 cultivators were able to enter the stage of the Ascendant. After all, there were almost 30,000 cultivators participating in the first test, and there were almost 3,000 participants in the second test as well. But only these people made it to the third stage. It could be imagined that more than 2,000 powerful cultivators lost their lives in the Great Hunt. This was a shocking number. Those who died were all Emperor Realm existences who had won 9 consecutive victories in the arena. Among them, the weakest was at the peak of the 7th level. But now they were all buried in the Great Void Immortal Realm. It was chilling to think about it. P.S. Additional updates will be sent to you. If you are surprised, please use your monthly votes to encourage the goldfish. Chapter 2637. More than 300 people. To be able to survive the Great Void Immortal Realm, no matter how many achievements they have, is not something ordinary people can achieve. In fact, Lin Sun has already noticed that among the people present, except for the big forces like the Gu clan and the Yun clan, who relied on a strong lineup to enter the Ascendant stage, there are many fierce characters who have gone through layers of screening and killed their way out. For example, Song Fuxing and the Man with a Blade are among them. And characters like Qi Lingyun and Lin Feng are undoubtedly more dangerous. What surprised Lin Sun the most is that there is no lack of characters like Qi Lingyun and Lin Feng. You are Lin Sun? A young man wearing a fiery feather robe squatted on the ground, holding a green leaf in his mouth, suddenly smiled and said. Lin Sun looked at him. What's the matter? The young man showed a harmless smile and said, Let's get to know each other. My name is Zhongli Xiao. If there is a chance, I want to exchange pointers with you. Of course, I have no malicious intent, it's just a pure exchange. If you agree, no matter the result, I will be happy to be your guide and take you to the 8th heaven. Zhongli Xiao. Even if they don't know this person, just hearing his surname shocked many people, because this is the surname of one of the immortal giants of the 8th heaven. Let's talk about it later. Lin Sun said perfunctorily. The young man Zhongli Xiao smiled and didn't say much. He closed his eyes and pretended to sleep leisurely. But someone clapped and laughed. Interesting, Zhongli Xiao also has a time when he was rejected, This is very rare. The person who spoke was wearing a tall hat and a broad belt. He carried a sword case on his back, and his sleeves fluttered in the wind. He looked divine and mighty. When his eyes opened and closed, there was a pair of silver symbols flashing in his pupils, sharp and terrifying. The crowd was restless again. Zhong Li Xiao must be an immortal giant from the 8th heaven, but now, someone dared to tease him like this. How could his identity be simple? Soon, this person's identity was revealed. His name is Mu Yi, an immortal giant from the 8th heaven. You still have many rare things, don't make a fuss. Zhong Li Xiao curled his lips, his face full of disdain. Mu Yi's eyes surged with a terrifying divine light. Why don't you and I find a chance to exchange pointers? Zhong Li Xiao said. All right, as long as you dare to use the Crimson Thorn as a wager, I'll play with you. The Crimson Sting. It was one of the most powerful Dao weapons of the Mu clan. It was known as eternally imperishable under Crimson. He is extremely famous in the 8th heaven. At this moment, everyone could see that there was enmity between Zhong Li Xiao and Mu Yi. If that's the case, I'll also participate in such a spar. Suddenly, a man with unkempt hair, cold eyes that were like swords, and his entire body was suffused with a dark gray glow spoke. He stood there like a god of swords in the darkness, and even if his cultivation was suppressed, it still caused one's heart to palpitate with fear. Zhong Li Xiao and Mu Yi sneered and stopped speaking. However, it was faintly discernible that they felt a trace of fear towards this man with unkempt beard and hair. Seeing this scene, everyone present looked at each other in dismay. No one dared to say anything, for fear of being involved in the battle between the immortal giants of the 8th heaven. In fact, in everyone's eyes, whether it was Zhong Li Xiao, Mu Yi, or the man with unkempt hair, they were all existences that couldn't be offended. Even the top forces of the 7th heaven, such as the Gu clan and the Yun clan, had to bow their heads in the face of such nobles. That's enough. How can we really make a move in this kind of place? Don't let the people here laugh at us, otherwise, they will think that the people of the 8th heaven are all shameless, boastful people. Qi Lingyun's voice was as elegant as an orchid. She looked at the man with unkempt hair and smiled. Qi Pejuan, if you want to participate, why don't we have a bet on who will be able to ascend the heaven's chosen road and reach the central immortal court? What do you think? Qi Pejuan. Hearing such a unique surname, everyone seemed to finally realize the identity of the man with unkempt hair, and their expressions changed. The 8th heaven is controlled by the 10 immortal giants. Each of them has monstrous power, enough to deter all living beings in the eternal true world. Among them, the forces of the Qi clan and the Qi clan can firmly rank in the top 4, but as for who is ranked 3rd and who is ranked 4th, there has been a constant debate. In short, in the 8th heaven, some people regard the Qi clan as the 3rd giant, while others regard the Qi clan as the 3rd giant. This debate has existed for a long time, and until now, there has been no clear answer. After understanding these inside stories, everyone also understood that if the Zhongli clan and the Mu clan are at odds, then the Qi clan and the Qi clan are also competitors who fight openly and secretly. What do you want to bet? Qi Pejuan said without hesitation, his eyes cold and fierce. Qi Lingyun, who was wearing a long dress and holding a scroll in her hand, smiled and looked at Lin Sun, who had been staying out of the matter, and said, If I win, please come forward and persuade this fellow Taoist Lin Sun to obediently bow down to me. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned, and their expressions were strange. It seemed that they didn't expect that Qi Lingyun would use subduing Lin Sun as a bet. A cold light flashed in the depths of Lin Sun's black eyes, and he didn't say anything. A wisp of detest and killing intent had arisen in his heart, and he'd sentenced this seemingly elegant, quiet, and aloof woman to death. Bow down to me? If there's a chance in the future, let's see who will bow down to whom. Qi Pejuan glanced at Lin Sun. Although he was slightly puzzled, he still said without hesitation, What if you lose? Then I'll give you a piece of immortal gold essence in my hand. How about it? Qi Lingyun said. Instantly, the hearts of many emperor ancestors trembled. Immortal gold essence. It was a legendary treasure that belonged to the immortal realm, and even a thumb-sized piece of it could make immortals fight to the death for it. Qi Pejuan raised his eyebrows and said, "All right. Hey, you're doing this deliberately. Will the one and only chosen one who can enter the central immortal court be born from the two of you?" Zhong Lixiao spoke with a displeased expression. "You can bet as well." Qi Lingyun smiled gently. "My request is the same as before. If you lose, help me persuade Taoist Lin Sun. If you win, I'll give you a piece of immortal gold essence." Up until now, if the crowd still didn't know that Qi Lingyun was targeting Lin Sun, then they would have lived for so many years in vain. For a moment, they looked at Lin Sun with pity in their eyes. How could vicious Lin, who had killed countless people in the great void immortal realm, offend a noble from the eighth heaven? All right. Zhong Lixiao didn't care about Lin Sun's feelings. In fact, whether it was him or Qi Pejuan, when they made the decision to bet, they didn't care about these things. They came from the eighth heaven, and the environment they grew up in, as well as what they had seen and heard since they started cultivating, made them look down on anyone below the eighth heaven. This wasn't arrogance, but a natural disposition that was branded in their bones. In their eyes, people who didn't belong to the eighth heaven didn't belong to the same world as them. They didn't need to pretend to be humble and low-key, but it depended on who they were dealing with. To put it bluntly, no matter how dazzling Lin Sun's previous achievements were, how heaven-defying and extraordinary in their eyes, he was nothing more than a character that they were interested in, a person that they could recruit to serve them. Just like Lin Feng, who was beside Qi Lingyun. How dazzling and powerful was he! But now, he was just a worshipper of the Qi clan, and a protector who followed Qi Lingyun. It was true that in the eternal true world, Lin Feng was already an extraordinary existence, but in the eyes of the 10 immortal giants of the eighth heaven, he was just a worshipper who could be cultivated. Compared to this, Lin Sun's weight in the hearts of the eighth heaven's nobles was roughly the same. Of course, this was very uncomfortable, but in the eyes of the people present, especially the cultivators from the Gu clan and the Yun clan, this was a matter of course. A matter of course was enough to show how monstrous the power of the 10 giants was in the eternal true world. After countless years, this influence had long been deeply rooted in people's hearts. In that case, I'm also willing to participate. Mu Yi also spoke, attracted by the immortal gold essence promised by Qi Lingyun. Qi Lingyun smiled calmly and nodded. Okay. Then, she looked at Lin Sun and said, "Lin Sun, do you now understand how important you are to me? My conditions haven't changed. Before the matter of the god's relic ends, as long as you agree to serve me, I don't mind getting you any cultivation resources you want." The crowd was in an uproar. In the eyes of many people, this was definitely a great thing that made them envious and jealous. As long as they agreed, they could enter the eighth heaven to cultivate, and their fate would change accordingly. But Lin soon became more and more unhappy. He glanced at Qi Lingyun and said, "Why don't I also make a bet? If I lose, I can give you my life. If you lose, I don't want your life. I just want you to slap yourself and scold yourself. How about that?" There was a sudden silence in the field, and everyone couldn't help but gasp. Was Lin Sun crazy? Even Zhong Lixiao, Mu Yi, Qi Pejuan and others were stunned for a moment. They seemed to be very surprised that Lin Sun dared to provoke and humiliate Qi Lingyun. Wasn't he courting death? Gu Banzwang, Yun Luhong and others couldn't help but look strange. It seemed that this guy not only didn't fear them, but also didn't take the Qi clan of the eighth heaven seriously. There was silence in the field. Everyone turned to look at Qi Lingyun in unison. The elegant woman in a long dress holding a scroll in her hand didn't show any emotion at the moment. She was still as indifferent as before. But when she looked at Lin Sun keenly noticed that there was a hint of killing intent in this woman's heart. However, Lin Sun didn't care about this and said, "What, you don't dare to bet?" There was undisguised sarcasm in his voice. Qi Lingyun suddenly laughed, staring at Lin Sun and said softly, "Lin Sun, do you think you are qualified to participate in this bet? Wake up. You're just a wager." Chapter 26:38. Her voice was very calm, as if she was stating a fact. But the disdain in her voice was clear. She was saying, "Who do you think you are? How dare you participate in this bet?" Zhong Lixiao, Mu Yi and Qi Pejuan laughed. The attitude shown by Qi Lingyun was exactly what they were most familiar with and understood, because people like them really disdained to bet with unqualified people. Lin Sun didn't get angry. He just smiled and didn't say anything more, because whatever he said would be regarded as unqualified by the other party, and the power of words was often the weakest at this time. Since it was useless to say more, there was no need to talk nonsense. What eighth heaven, immortal giants, when he surpassed them one day, he would ask them what qualification was, and he believed that the answer would be completely different from now. A burst of ethereal immortal music suddenly sounded at this moment, followed by a golden road, which spread down from the center of the mountain where the immortal court was located, and fell on the cliff plateau halfway up the mountain. The immortal light was dense, and the golden light was steaming. This road led directly to the center of the mountain peak, the immortal court. This was the road to the top. It was also called the road chosen by heaven. Only the strongest had the ability to set foot on it, and then live in the center of the immortal court. More than 300 cultivators on the cliff plateau became restless, their eyes shining, and they were ready to take action. In the last era, the third stage of the competition was to challenge this road chosen by heaven. No matter who it was, they only had one chance. Once they couldn't pass this road and reach the highest point of the central immortal court, they would be eliminated. According to rumors, on the road chosen by heaven, there were battle marks left by the strongest in each battle of heaven. Once you set foot on it, you would face the battle power left by the strongest immortal cultivators. It must be known that the heavens chosen battle of the last era was held once every 100,000 years. Every time it was held, only one ultimate powerhouse would emerge victorious and become the heavens chosen. One could imagine how terrifying the battle brand left behind by such an ultimate powerhouse would be. "I'll go first." Suddenly, a peerless figure rushed out. The moment he set foot on the road chosen by heaven, his suppressed cultivation was immediately restored, and he showed the terrifying power that belonged to the peak of the 8th level of Great Emperor. But he'd only walked a few hundred meters before his body seemed as if it was struck by a mountain torrent, and it was blasted flying with a bang before falling onto the cliff. His expression was filled with unwillingness and shock. It seemed as if that distance of a few thousand meters from before had caused him to experience something terrifying. The path of heaven's chosen is filled with the mysterious aura of space and time. Walking on it is like walking on the river of time from the previous era. You will encounter one opponent after another that was formed by the strongest. Someone said in a low voice, "Just now that person seemed to have only walked a few thousand meters, but to him, he probably experienced a cycle of time. Even 1,000 years in an instant wouldn't amount to much." The expressions of many in the surroundings had become solemn. An 8th great martial emperor who had fought his way through the layers of selection in the arena defense and the great hunt was extremely powerful. But now, he had only walked a few hundred zhang before he was eliminated, and there was a total of 3,000 zhang to reach the immortal court at the center of the mountain peak. There is only one heaven's chosen one. Don't overestimate yourselves. Zhong Lixiao chuckled. "Let me give it a try." An imperial ancestor walked forward. When he stepped foot onto the path of heaven's chosen, he erupted with terrifying might that caused everyone to look at him in surprise. But in the end, he'd merely walked 3 kilometers before he staggered and was blasted flying. He fell onto the cliff, and he even coughed up blood without end while his gaze dimmed down. He was actually injured. This scene caused some of the cultivators in the surroundings to be unable to help but feel nervous, and no matter how conceited they were, they couldn't help but feel pressured. Even an imperial ancestor could only advance 3 kilometers. This path of the heavens chosen that belonged to the last era was undoubtedly too abnormal. In the following period of time, numerous cultivators moved forward. However, practically without exception, all of them stopped within 3 kilometers of the path of the heavens chosen and were eliminated. It was like that distance was a barrier that was extremely difficult to surmount. The atmosphere in the surroundings grew even more oppressive along with this, and the mental states of some cultivators couldn't help but be slightly shaken. Indeed, there was no danger in the path of ascension, and they didn't have to worry about perishing. However, this extremely cruel elimination rate was still too terrifying, and it caused a shadow to appear in the hearts of these formidable figures who'd experienced numerous slaughters and arrived here with great difficulty. It should be known that figures like them practically represented the peak of the imperial realm, yet they were actually unable to overcome the battle brands left behind on the path of the heavens chosen. Lin Sun had been watching from the side with a calm expression. However, he couldn't help but be shocked in his heart. The cruelty of the path of the heavens chosen had exceeded his expectations. As time passed, finally someone passed through the distance of 3 kilometers. It was Yun Luohong from the Yun clan, an extremely formidable imperial ancestor. This caused many people to be excited, and they finally saw some hope. But in next to no time, Yun Luohong was defeated as well. When he reached the distance of 3 kilometers, he was washed away by an expanse of golden light and fell down fiercely. His face was pale and unsightly, and his eyes were filled with surprise and bewilderment. No one knew what kind of battles an imperial ancestor like him had experienced, but they couldn't help but feel sad when they saw an existence like him being defeated halfway. After observing for a long time, Lin Sun decided not to wait any longer. Whether it was success or failure, he had to give it a try. There were many people who had similar ideas as him. At least until now, no one had chosen to give up. However, just as Lin Sun took a step, he saw a figure had already rushed forward. The figure was wearing a high hat and ancient clothes, with big sleeves fluttering, and a pair of symbols emerging in his eyes. It was Mu Yi. Since you're not qualified to bet, why are you so anxious to prove yourself? He glanced at Lin Sun with a smile and went straight to the path of the heavens chosen. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and stood in place. He wanted to see where Mu Yi could go. At this time, all eyes fell on Mu Yi. They all wanted to see whether this noble figure from the 8th heaven could reach the top in one fell swoop. Mu Yi's performance was indeed different from the others before. It was extremely extraordinary. In a few blinks of an eye, he reached the distance of 3 kilometers, causing many exclamations in the field. But after arriving here, his speed slowed down, but he still seemed very calm. Almost under everyone's gaze, he reached the distance of 3 kilometers step by step, and continued to advance towards the last 3 kilometers. This shocked many cultivators. They had to admit that Mu Yi from the 8th heaven was indeed powerful and admirable. At this time, Zhong Lixiao couldn't help but ask Qi Lingyun, if Mu Yi, Qi Pejuan and I all reach the top, I'm afraid you won't have enough immortal pure gold in your hands, right? Qi Lingyun said indifferently, don't worry, even if all of you reach the top, only one person can become the chosen. At that time, it will depend on who can reach the top in the shortest time. Zhong Lixiao thought for a moment and said with a smile, it seems that if I want to beat you, I can only become the only chosen. Qi Lingyun said, do you think it's so easy to get the immortal pure gold? However, the expected situation didn't happen. When Mu Yi reached the 2,900-foot mark, his figure, which had already seemed to be difficult to walk, suddenly trembled, and then he was directly knocked out, turned into an arc, and fell on the cliff platform. Bang! His figure staggered, and when he finally stood firm, his hair was disheveled, his face was livid, and his eyes were full of anger and unwillingness. He seemed to have lost his composure. This scene made the audience fall into a dead silence. Even someone as powerful as Mu Yi had been eliminated? Zhong Lixiao, who was originally complacent, couldn't help but reveal a solemn expression. He was well aware of Mu Yi's strength, but he was mercilessly pushed back in the last 300 m, and this caused him to feel pressure that assaulted his face. Qi Lingyun, Qi Pejuan and others felt the same. Mu Yi's defeat made them, who had absolute confidence in themselves, feel the horror of the ascendant. Since you've already participated in the bet, why are you so anxious to prove yourself? In this silence, Lin Sun suddenly laughed, returning Mu Yi's words just now, and the sarcasm was not concealed at all. Mu Yi's handsome face suddenly became gloomy, and his eyes were full of anger and killing intent. He said, "If you have the guts, say it again." Everyone's heart trembled, and it was difficult to understand. Mu Yi's defeat had already made him furious, but Lin Sun's sarcasm at this time was like sprinkling salt on the wound. At this time, facing the incomparably angry Mu Yi, Lin Sun seemed to be very obedient and said seriously, "Since you've already participated in the bet, why are you so anxious to prove yourself?" "You." Mu Yi was so angry that his lips trembled, but his cultivation was suppressed again, so he couldn't do anything at all. Otherwise, he would have attacked at the first moment. Lin Sun said with a smile, "No need to say more. You've already failed in your so-called bet, and I, Lin Sun, don't need a loser like you to persuade me, because you're not qualified." There was a dead silence. Everyone was dumbfounded and completely shocked by Lin Sun's words. How could this guy be so daring? Was he really not afraid of death, or was he completely desperate? Mu Yi was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. He pointed at Lin Sun with a trembling finger, and said, "Lin Sun, I'll remember you. Just you wait." Lin Sun laughed, and didn't bother to pay attention to Mu Yi. When he was about to take action, he found that Zhong Lixiao had also started to take action. "What? Do you want to repeat his mistakes and rush to prove yourself first?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Zhong Lixiao's figure stagnated, and he turned his head to stare at Lin Sun. "Lin Sun, I have a good impression of you. Don't make me hate you." Lin Sun said, "Using me as a bet is called a good impression? I'm sorry, I can't afford this kind of good impression. Please be magnanimous and take back your so-called good impression." "You." Zhong Lixiao was angry, and his eyes were full of killing intent. "If you really want to die, wait until we leave the god's relic and I'll fulfill your wish. P.S. I'll continue to update tonight. I'm eager to get monthly votes for encouragement." Chapter 2639. After that, Zhong Lixiao turned around and rushed to the Golden Chosen Road. Lin Sun smiled and didn't care about the strange gazes cast on him. He had already offended the 4 clans of the East Imperial family. "I'm sure that you are a person who is not afraid of death, but do you think it's worth it to get yourself killed because of what happened today?" Not far away, Qi Lingyun asked. "Let's see who can survive until the end," Lin Sun said casually, as if he didn't care about these things at all. This made many people secretly admire him. In this world, even the powerful ancestors and the terrifying immortals, who dares to be as fearless as Lin Sun when facing the clansmen of the immortal giants of the 8th heaven? Qi Lingyun said softly, "Then I might as well say that if I can't subdue people like you, I would rather destroy you." The clouds were calm and the wind was gentle. But that kind of threat was enough to make anyone feel cold. In this regard, Lin Sun only said "oh" and didn't look at Qi Lingyun again from beginning to end. "So strong!" someone exclaimed. Everyone followed the gaze and saw that on the chosen road, Zhong Lixiao's figure had already crossed 2,000 feet and was advancing towards the top of the mountain. Compared with Mu Yi just now, he was not much weaker. until seeing his figure approaching 2,900 feet step by step, everyone in the field couldn't help but hold their breath and watch nervously. And when they saw Zhong Lixiao's figure crossing 2,900 feet and still had the power to move forward, the field was already restless. This had surpassed Mu Yi's performance just now. I haven't seen this guy for many years. It seems that he has obviously hidden a lot of strength before, Qi Pejuan said in surprise. He had seen that Zhong Lixiao's performance at the moment was obviously stronger than they knew. Humph! In the atmosphere of surprise, only Mu Yi's face was extremely gloomy. Being surpassed by Zhong Lixiao in this way made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Another Zhu Xian, Emperor Ancestor, Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly. Even if he didn't want to, he had to admit that these characters from the Eighth Heaven were all overlords on the Emperor's road. They were so powerful that they could suppress most of the same realm. In fact, those who could become Zhu Xian Emperor Ancestor were indeed peerless geniuses, 1 in 10,000 and extremely abnormal. Even if it was Mu Yi, it was sufficient to make those senior ancestor realm figures feel ashamed of their inferiority and have no choice but to lower their heads. This was the power of the Zhu Tian ancestor. Success. When they saw Zhong Lixiao's figure appear on the peak of the mountain, the surroundings seethed with excitement, and all the cultivators had various expressions on their faces. When compared to Zhong Lixiao, they couldn't help but feel dejected and defeated. Such a heaven-defying figure is really too formidable. Even Lin Sun was surprised. Zhong Lixiao seemed to be a wild, unruly, and frivolous person, but it was obviously just a facade, and he truly possessed a terrifying strength that far surpassed all others. At this moment, he also noticed that Mu Yi's hands had uncontrollably clenched into fists, his expression faintly sinister. Obviously, Zhong Lixiao's ascension to the top was quite a huge blow to him. Qi Lingyun spoke with a calm tone. Looks like Zhong Lixiao has become a formidable opponent in the bet. To her, Zhong Lixiao had ascended to the top, but he still wasn't the only heaven's chosen one. She could only wait for the battle to end and see how many people could ascend to the top. Only then would she be able to ascend to the top based on their own abilities. The time it took to ascend to the top would determine the winner. The peak of this mountain overlooks the world. It's worthy of being the central immortal court. Everyone, I'm looking forward to seeing who can stand shoulder to shoulder with me. Ha ha! On the peak of the mountain, Zhong Lixiao, who wore a pair of fiery red wings and looked like a young man, let out a hearty laugh that resounded through the clouds. Everyone couldn't help but reveal a complicated expression. What are you so proud of? As he spoke, Qi Pejuan strode towards the heaven's chosen path. At least half of the cultivators here hadn't participated in the trial, and they could only retreat and wait when they saw this. A quarter of an hour later, Qi Pejuan ascended to the top in a domineering manner, causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. The smile on Zhong Lixiao's face instantly vanished, and Mu Yi's expression became even more unsightly as he stood on the plateau and witnessed all of this. These two ascended to the top at almost the same time. Do you have the confidence to surpass them? Qi Lingyun looked at Lin Feng, who stood beside her. Lin Feng's slightly mediocre face was emotionless as he said, "I'll do my best." Qi Lingyun nodded. "Don't force yourself. It's just losing a piece of immortal gold essence. I can't afford it." Lin Feng grunted and directly started moving. In next to no time, everyone present was shocked. Lin Feng's speed couldn't be said to be too fast, but it gave others the feeling that he was extremely steady and unstoppable. He really isn't simple. Lin Sun noticed all of this and couldn't help but be surprised. Lin Feng, the imperial ancestor from the fifth heaven, was even stronger than Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pejuan on the heaven's chosen path. If nothing unexpected happened, Lin Feng probably wouldn't be eliminated. Sure enough, under the gazes of everyone, Lin Feng's figure appeared step by step on the peak of the mountain. Good. Qi Lingyun's eyes were suffused with a smile, and she was in high spirits. She'd calculated with her fingers and found that Lin Feng's speed was even faster than Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pejuan, so the time he spent was naturally shorter. At this point, Qi Lingyun had already won this bet. On the peak of the mountain, a wisp of gloominess appeared between the brows of Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pejuan, and the joy and excitement they felt when they ascended the peak had vanished. What they couldn't accept the most was the fact that Lin Feng was only a revered elder of Qi Lingyun's side, yet he was now superior to them. Even if the gap was extremely small, it was still a gap after all. As for Mu Yi, his handsome face was livid at this moment, and he looked like he wanted to find a hole to hide in. It was fine if he was surpassed by Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pejuan, but now he was surpassed by Qi Lingyun's protector. This was like an invisible slap on his face. At present, there were already 3 strong people who had ascended the peak, and this seemed to give many people confidence and hope. In the following time, there were people who continuously went to the trial. But the result was cruel and cold, and almost all of them were eliminated without exception. Among them, when he saw Tsang Fuxing also stopped at a distance of more than 2,600 meters, Lin Sun's calm heart sighed slightly. After all, Tsang Fuxing was only at the peak of the 8th Heaven Emperor realm, and he couldn't be compared with the imperial ancestor. But to Lin Sun's surprise, the saber-bearer, wearing a bamboo hat and carrying a saber on his back, actually ascended the peak in one go. Although his speed was far inferior to Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejuan, and Lin Feng, his performance still caused an uproar. Only now did people recognize that the saber-bearer was actually not the peak of the 8th Heaven Emperor on the wanted list, but an existence at the peak of the imperial ancestor realm. Many seniors of the immortal emperor clans had already decided to wait for the ruins of the gods to fall. They did everything they could to rope in the saber-bearer. Time passed bit by bit, and more cultivators went up, but no one ascended the peak. Some lamented, some were unwilling, and some were despondent. The blow of being eliminated was too great after all. Lin Sun noticed that Lu Xiangque and Xiang Xiaoyuan were eliminated one after another, but they were rather calm and didn't lose control of their emotions. Obviously, they'd expected that the hope of ascending the peak with their own strength was very slim, so they didn't feel very unwilling. Qi Lingyun looked at Lin Sun. Now you're the only one left who hasn't gone to the trial. Could it be that you intend to give up? The others looked over as well. Previously, everyone had noticed that Lin Sun had already planned to go to the trial, but Zhong Lixiao and Qi Pejuan had beaten him to it. But in the following period of time, Lin Sun didn't take any action, which made people feel strange. Could it be that he knew that his strength wasn't enough and decided to give up? Lin Sun smiled and glanced at Qi Lingyun. Are you not human? Everyone was startled at first, but soon understood the meaning behind his words, and their expressions became strange. Qi Lingyun indeed didn't go to the trial, but who didn't know that Lin Feng's ascension to the peak meant that she didn't need to go to the trial? Qi Lingyun's expression was obviously sluggish, and she also realized that there was something wrong with her words. She couldn't help but say coldly, "I'd like to see how you'll be eliminated." Lin Sun ignored her and walked forward. In fact, everyone present couldn't help but be curious. Although Vicious Lin was a peak of the 8th Heaven Emperor realm, he could kill an Emperor Ancestor realm existence in a head-on battle, which was completely incomparable to those in the same realm. Could he reach the peak? There was hope, but it was very slim. This was what everyone knew. After all, the 4 people standing at the peak of the mountain were all Zhu Xian Emperor Ancestors. They were existences more terrifying than one Dao Ancestor, and in the eternal world, they were legendary figures that were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. At least in the top 6 heavens, it was almost impossible to see Zhu Xian Emperor Ancestors. Even in the 7th heaven, there were only a handful of them, and they were extremely rare. If it wasn't for the amazing fortune in the god's relic, it would be impossible to see so many Zhu Xian Emperor Ancestors gathered together. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Sun stepped onto the path of the Chosen One. Then, an incredible scene happened. Lin Sun's figure was like a dazzling light, and he appeared at a speed of 10,000 feet. From start to finish, it only took a blink of an eye. Everyone had an expression as if they had seen a ghost. What was going on? Qi Lingyun was stunned, and her jade-like hand holding the scroll couldn't help but clench. This abnormal scene caught her off guard, and she was shocked. But before everyone could recover from their shock, they saw Lin Sun's figure continue to fly forward, like an exiled immortal flying on the mountain road, his sleeves fluttering in the wind, and he looked very elegant. In comparison, Zhong Lixiao and the others who had reached the 10,000 feet mark before looked as clumsy as snails. On the mountain peak, Zhong Lixiao and the others couldn't help but be dumbfounded, and they almost thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Wasn't this too fierce? In the end, everyone was completely dumbfounded, and they stood there in shock. Because up to the 20,000 feet mark, Lin Sun's speed didn't show any signs of slowing down, and he was still flying forward, extremely cool and unrestrained. P.S. I'm sending more updates. Chapter 2640. At this moment, everyone had an illusion that the path Lin Sun was walking on was completely different from the path they had taken before. Otherwise, how could Lin Sun walk so easily, so contentedly, and so freely? It should be known that the path of heavens chosen contained the battle marks of many supreme experts from the previous era. Every supreme expert had experienced slaughter in the battle of heavens chosen that occurred once every 100,000 years, and in the end, they were the one and only heavens chosen. This meant that if one wanted to arrive at the peak of the mountain, then it was like returning to the last era, and one had to defeat numerous supreme experts in the annals of time. It was extremely difficult. Otherwise, Zhong Lixiao and the other three great ancestors wouldn't have been the only ones to reach the peak. Even Muyi and the other Juetian emperor ancestors had failed at the last step. In comparison, Lin Sun's performance on the Chosen One's path could be described as shocking, or even abnormal. Too fast, too graceful, and too relaxed, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard, riding the wind. Who could accept this? This is impossible. He is a peak 8th level emperor. How can he be stronger than a peak emperor ancestor? Muyi was the first to be unable to accept it. He had suffered more than one blow, starting from Zhong Lixiao until now, every blow dealt a heavy blow to his dignity. But Zhong Lixiao and the others were all Juetian emperor ancestors, so it was barely acceptable. But now, Lin Sun, a peak 8th level emperor, had the momentum to reach the summit. This made Muyi furious, and he felt a great disparity and imbalance. Why? Qi Lingyun spoke up as well. Her eyes were filled with determination. I don't believe that he's capable of doing this with his strength. There must be something else behind this. There must be a reason for something abnormal. In her opinion, everything that happened to Lin Sun was too abnormal, completely beyond everyone's imagination. Do you think so too? Muyi was excited, as if he had found a confidant. Everyone present was silent, unable to calm down. Of course, they did not want to believe it, but this was the battle of the Chosen One, covered with the supreme power of rules left by the Central Immortal Court. No matter how abnormal it was, it could not change the fact that Lin Sun was about to reach the summit. At this time, if he tried to use other reasons to prove that Lin Sun couldn't do it by his own strength, it would be a little inappropriate. In the eyes of the crowd, Mu Yi and Qi Lingyun had clearly lost their composure. Lu Xiangque and Xiang Xiaoyuan looked at each other and saw a trace of disdain flash in each other's eyes. Obviously, they looked down on Mu Yi and Qi Lingyun's current performance. Right at this moment, the crowd was stirred and seething with excitement. Because Lin Sun had easily appeared on the top of the mountain like an immortal. It seems to be less than 30 breaths. Someone was trembling. This is unbelievable. How did Vicious Lin do it? All the people in the field were shocked by Lin Sun's achievements at the moment. This is definitely another problem. Mu Yi gritted his teeth, his face ashen. Qi Lingyun had already recovered her calm. She'd realized that she'd lost her composure earlier, but when she saw Lin Sun ascend the peak so easily, her fair and jade-like hands that held the scroll couldn't help but clench tightly. "Uncle, did you think that something like this would happen?" Xiang Xiaoyuan's eyes were wandering. "Break the skull." "I didn't." Lu Xiangque sighed with emotion while his heart roiled without end. The more he came into contact with Lin Sun, the more he noticed that this young man from the ancient path of the starry sky was truly too unexpected, and it seemed as if there was nothing in this world that he couldn't accomplish. This era's one chosen by the heavens. Xiang Xiaoyuan suddenly laughed soundlessly. Conversely, she felt that all of this was normal. Because that person's name was Lin Sun. Mist arose on the peak of the mountain, and the grand, lofty, and boundlessly brilliant central immortal court was nearby. It was like the residence of the gods. However, when he arrived here, Lin Sun immediately sensed that his strength had been suppressed once more, and he stood on the spot and was utterly unable to move. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun finally understood why Zhong Lixiao and the others hadn't headed to the central immortal court at the first possible moment. They obviously couldn't be considered as the chosen by the heavens. "You." At this moment, Zhong Lixiao's expression was extremely gloomy, and he seemed as if he had a chest full of words yet was unable to speak them. Qi Pejuan had a gloomy expression as well, and he seemed as if he'd eaten a fly. Lin Feng remained silent as usual, but when he looked at Lin Sun, there was an irrepressible surprise and a trace of coldness in his eyes. As for the man with the blade, although his expression couldn't be seen clearly because of the bamboo hat on his head, it was impossible for him to remain calm in his heart. Obviously, it was also a big blow to those who had already reached the top of the mountain for Lin Sun to arrive at the peak so quickly and easily. "What's wrong with me?" Lin Sun couldn't help but ask out of goodwill. He was worried that Zhong Lixiao would get sick if he held it in for too long. Zhong Lixiao seemed to be venting his inner emotions as he said word by word, "You! Cheater! Cheater!" His voice resounded through the 9 heavens. Everyone present was stunned. Many people were trying hard to hold back their laughter, and the corners of their lips twitched fiercely. Such an absurd reason actually came from the mouth of Zhong Lixiao, a peerless ancestor of the great emperor. The contrast was too great. Qi Pejuan and Lin Feng couldn't help but turn their heads, and they were obviously shocked by Zhong Lixiao's exasperated words. Lin Sun was startled for a moment, and secretly gave Zhong Lixiao a thumbs up in his heart. This guy really had sharp eyes. In fact, Lin Sun was also in a very complicated mood at the moment. At the moment when he set foot on the Chosen One's way, he felt something unusual, because the jade disk of fate, which had been silent for a long time, produced a strange fluctuation like an invisible ripple at this moment. Every time a fighting brand left by a supreme powerhouse of the last era appeared, it would be collected by the power of the jade disk of fate before he could take action. Like plucking fruits, it plucked as it went. The battle imprints of supreme experts were harvested by the good fortune jade disk one after the other. There was no chance for him to take action at all. Lin Sun had no choice. He had already decided to have a try with his own cultivation to see how strong the fighting power of the Chosen Ones were. But he never thought that, however, the good fortune jade disk had helped him commit a huge fraud without anyone noticing. The jade disk of fate was really a fool of people, although he felt a little strange in his heart. The feeling of climbing up and reaching the top with ease really made Lin Sun feel very good. At this moment, the jade disk of fate had already returned to silence, like a beast that had fallen into a deep sleep after eating its fill. The fighting brands of the supreme powerhouses, the complete order of immortals, and the inheritance of the Book of Origin had become a part of it. Lin Sun vaguely remembered that in the Tai ruins, there seemed to be a silent spirit of order in the jade disk of fate. But as soon as it appeared, it turned into a rain of light and dissipated, returning to silence. At that time, he suspected that the spirit of order in the jade disk of fate was very likely to be the spirit of order in the immortal world of the last era. Yet now, along with the collection of the Origin Tao scripture and the battle brands of the supreme experts of the last era, Lin Sun had a stronger feeling that it was very likely that there really was a spirit of order within the jade disk of creation, and it was just that it had always been in silence. Lin Sun, you must have used some method similar to cheating. Otherwise, even if you have the power to suppress the Emperor Ancestor, it would be impossible for you to leave so easily. Zhong Lixiao also realized that he had lost his composure. His face was very pale, but at least he regained his composure. This judgment was the same as Qi Lingyun. This was exactly what Qi Pejuan and Lin Feng suspected as well. Lin Sun wouldn't admit it, and he said without batting an eyelid, "Is this the excuse of a loser? Or perhaps you, Zhong Lixiao, are a sore loser?" Zhong Lixiao instantly gritted his teeth and said, "It's fine if you don't admit it. Once we leave this place, I'll naturally test your true combat strength. At that time, the truth will definitely be revealed." Lin Sun smiled and didn't speak any further. Dong! A wave of the sound of a divine drum resounded. On the pillar at the side of the central immortal court, a drum that was coiled with immortal light surged into appearance at the spot where the words "All gods descend by beating the jade drum" were inscribed, and the sound of the drum was coming from it. After that, a strand of immortal light suddenly charged out from within the tightly closed door of the central immortal court. It was crystalline, resplendent, illusory, and ethereal. As soon as it appeared, it enveloped Lin Sun's figure. After that, his figure vanished on the spot. On the other hand, Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejuan, Lin Feng, and the man that carried a blade were carried by a shapeless force, and they floated down onto the plateau. They had indeed reached the peak, but in the end, they didn't get any reward. This caused Zhong Lixiao and the others' hearts to rise and fall, and they gave birth to a sullen feeling that no one else could understand. It was extremely uncomfortable to hold it in. Vicious Lin has actually become the chosen one on the plateau. A group of cultivators had a complicated expression on their faces. Some were shocked, some were envious, and some were in disbelief. Previously, they all thought that this supreme fortune would be obtained by the nobles of the eighth heaven. But in the end, it was a person that no one had expected to obtain. The ruins of the gods is regarded as the first forbidden area in the vast thousand battles domain, and this fortune can absolutely be regarded as the supreme treasure of the last era. Vicious Lin's combat strength is incomparably heaven-defying. After obtaining this fortune, why worry about not being able to reach the peak and become an ancestor? Why worry about not being able to achieve immortality in the future? Various sighs sounded. Thinking about it, Lin Sun was able to suppress the Emperor Ancestor, leave his name on the Xian list, and wipe out the experts of the seventh heaven, such as the Nan clan and the Li clan. Now that he had obtained such a supreme fortune, how terrifying would his future achievements be? Obtaining the fortune doesn't mean that he can keep it, someone said coldly with a gloomy expression. Do you all think that Lin Sun can still leave the vast thousand battles domain alive after obtaining the fortune? This sentence caused many people's eyes to change subtly, and they all had different expressions. Outside the ruins of the gods, there were many immortal figures guarding it. If they knew that this supreme fortune was obtained by Lin Sun, how could they let him leave alive under their noses? Look at the 4 Eastern Emperor clans. Then look at the nobles of the immortal forces, who would tolerate him leaving with the fortune. Chapter 2641. There is no need to wait until we leave this place. Don't forget that there is still a convention of the immortal court after the battle for the throne. Zhong Lixiao said coldly. The convention of the immortal court. In the last era, after the battle of the Chosen One, any cultivator who entered the battle for the throne could challenge the Chosen One in the convention of the immortal court if they were not convinced. If the Chosen One could block all obstacles, He could be regarded as the successor of the Central Immortal Court in the true sense. If he couldn't, the so-called title of Chosen One would be deprived, and the winner would enter the Central Immortal Court and become the successor of the Central Immortal Court. But in the rumors, such a situation rarely happened, because those who could kill their way out of the battle of the Chosen One once in 100,000 years were all supreme existences, and they had the power to be invincible in the same realm. However, Zhong Lixiao's words reminded everyone present that something that might not have happened in the last era might happen in the current era. The reason was very simple. They had all determined that there was something wrong with Lin Sun's performance on the road of Chosen One, and it was impossible for him to do it with his cultivation. Yes, there is still the convention of the Immortal Court. All of a sudden, Mu Yi's eyes lit up. He, who had suffered a blow before, seemed to see hope again at this moment. An opportunity to suppress Lin Sun and seize his fortune. At this time, Qi Lingyun also spoke. Her clear eyes were like water, and her voice was tactful. Everyone, I am not interested in the Chosen One, but if you can work together in the convention of the Immortal Court and take Lin Sun down for me, I don't mind taking you to the 8th heaven for cultivation. The crowd was restless. The more than 300 cultivators almost couldn't believe their ears. They could go to the 8th heaven for cultivation just by helping to deal with Lin Sun? Lu Xiangxue and Xiang Xiaoyuan's expressions changed at the same time, and they felt a chill in their hearts. Qi Lingyun was so ruthless that she wanted to tie everyone together to deal with Lin Sun. I can also agree to this, Qi Pejuan said. Zhongli Xiao said, count me in. How could they not understand that Qi Lingyun's move was absolutely killing two birds with one stone? She not only mobilized all forces to deal with Lin Sun, but also collected a group of rare talents for herself. After all of these cultivators here were top-rate figures who'd experienced the selection of the arena and the grand hunt, and they'd fought their way out of almost 30,000 emperors. No matter which one it was, all of them could be considered to be overlords at the same cultivation realm. If he was able to take them under his command, then the benefits he would obtain would probably be sufficient to move the hearts of even those eternal realm overlords. Imperial ancestor Zhu Lai was an existence that even the undying emperors of the 8th heaven valued and were willing to pay a huge price to recruit. Of course, I won't force you guys. If anyone is willing, you can join us when the Immortal Court assembly begins. Qi Lingyun said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, many people secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, it's tempting to go to the 8th heaven to cultivate, but the risk is also great. Among those present, the Gu clan and the Yun clan were the ones with the most uneasy expressions. Qi Lingyun's intervention would undoubtedly disrupt their plan to capture Lin Sun. If they missed this opportunity, how could they explain to Donghuang clan in the future? Qi Lingyun and the others might be after the fortune of the Central Immortal Court, but what the 4 clans of the Eastern Emperor were after was not this. Don't be impatient. Don't forget that the eternal realm figures of our 4 clans are waiting outside the God's relic. At that time, if Lin Sun dies, let those eternal realm figures come forward and ask Qi Lingyun and the others for the fortune related to Nirvana. Gu Banzwang's voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzzing, and she stood far away from the cliff platform to comfort everyone. Her cultivation was suppressed, so she couldn't transmit her voice. Everyone's perception was also weakened, so she didn't need to worry about others hearing what she said. That's the only way. Yun Luhong also nodded. Speaking of this matter, whether it was him, Gu Banzwang, or others, they all felt extremely depressed. How could all the good things in this world be monopolized by Lin Sun? The Nirvana fortune that the Donghuang clan was determined to get was with him, and the supreme treasure of the Central Immortal Court was also obtained by him. So now, whether it was Qi Lingyun and the other nobles of the 8th heaven, or the 4 clans of the Eastern Emperor, it was very likely that there would be friction because of competing for the fortune. This really made people speechless. Wait and see. The Immortal Court meeting will start in a month at the latest. At that time, that Lin Sun must spit out whatever he ate. Zhong Lixiao's eyes were very cold. Originally, he appreciated Lin Sun very much and wanted to guide him to the eighth heaven to cultivate. But what Lin Sun had done before made him completely furious. Don't forget about the bet. You all have to help persuade Lin Sun to bow down to me. Not far away, Qi Lingyun reminded with a smile. At the mention of the bet, Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejuan, and Mu Yi's faces were gloomy. White immortal mist filled the air, and the ground paved with black divine jade under their feet had already cracked, with many mottled cracks. Collapsed stone pillars were lying on the ground, and patterns of flowers, birds, insects, fish, and mountains and rivers could be faintly seen on the stone pillars. Further away there were broken bricks scattered on the ground, each of which was extremely huge. In front of the stone pillars there should be the central altar of a palace in the past, but it had also collapsed into a pile of broken stones. In the past, this place was a towering and magnificent immortal palace, representing the supreme authority and majesty of the immortal world. But now it was full of desolation, and the ground was in a mess, like an abandoned ruin. When he saw this scene, Lin Sun couldn't help but be stunned. This was completely different from the scene he expected. This is the Central Immortal Court? The most supreme place of this era? Lin Sun realized that even though the ruins of the gods were well preserved, the Central Immortal Court was probably severely destroyed in the great calamity of the end of this era. He began to walk here, and it was like walking on a silent ruin of eternity, giving people a sense of desolation and withering. The glory of the past seemed to have long been destroyed in this era, and the wind and rain blew away, leaving only desolation. Lin Sun, who was sighing with emotion in his heart, suddenly noticed a wisp of spirit light. When he looked carefully, that wisp of spirit light flashed from the depths of a pile of rubble. He walked forward and moved the rubble away with a wave of his sleeve. Only then did he see clearly that the wisp of spirit light was a tender green sprout that took root in the ruins, and it was verdant and showed a tenacious vitality. Lin Sun's heart trembled inexplicably. Is it reborn from destruction? This sprout was too weak, but it just so happened to give Lin Sun an extremely tenacious aura. It seemed that even if the era was destroyed and the immortal court declined, it would be unable to stop its growth. And it had become the only vitality in this abandoned immortal court. Lin Sun stared at it and noticed that this was a sapling of a tree that had just sprouted. The tender leaf was filled with an indescribable and mysterious aura, and it gave people the feeling that it wasn't a tiny tender leaf, but a vast and boundless world of the Grand Tao that carried the origin energy of the immortal Tao era. Could the rumors be true? Lin Sun recalled some rumors he'd heard before coming to the ruins of the gods. In the last era, the supreme treasure that belonged to the Central Immortal Court was a primordial myriad Tao tree, and it was known as the root of the immortal world. It was said that this tree would condense an unfathomable Tao fruit every 100,000 years. This fruit was born with the destiny of the immortal Tao, and if one swallowed and refined it, one would obtain the inconceivable fortune of the Grand Tao. Some people directly ascended into immortal form after consuming the Tao fruit, transforming into gods. Some people established an indestructible and immortal Tao, comprehending the profundities of great freedom, and great transcendence. Some people controlled the supreme Tao. In short, the Tao fruit condensed by the primordial myriad Tao tree gave different fortunes to everyone, and it could be said to be mysterious and unfathomable. And this primordial myriad Tao tree was also regarded as the supreme treasure of the Central Immortal Court. It was believed by the cultivators of the world that this tree was the root of the immortal Tao world, the origin of the profundities of all Taos. Originally, Lin Sun had scoffed at this rumor, but now he was somewhat uneasy. The entire Central Immortal Court had long been reduced to ruins. If there was a supreme treasure hidden here, then it would definitely be this sapling before him. Its aura was too mysterious. It was only the size of a fingernail, but it seemed to carry the origin power of the entire immortal Tao. However, if it was the primordial myriad Tao tree, it was at most a small sapling of the primordial myriad Tao tree. This fortune related to the supreme treasure is really unique. Lin Sun stroked his chin, and he was somewhat at a loss as to where to start. He was worried that the sapling would be broken if he accidentally touched it, and if he wanted to take away the entire sapling, he was worried that it would wither and wither. After pondering for a moment, Lin Sun suddenly thought of something and took out the creation jade disc. Immediately, a miraculous scene occurred. The green sapling actually trembled slightly, as if it was extremely excited, and it emitted strands of illusory and tiny green light. However, the creation jade disc was indifferent, and it was far from being as lively as when it had collected the Origin Tao book and those battle brands. Lin Sun took a deep breath, held the creation jade disc, and gently placed it beside the sapling. The sapling stretched out a soft branch that was as thin as an ox's hair and surged into the creation jade disc, as if it was absorbing something. Lin Sun's eyes lit up. It was indeed useful. A guess in his heart had been verified. Subsequently, the tender shoot broke through the ground like rain after a long drought. It took root and sprouted, and it swayed and grew within the ruins. In a short period of a few breaths of time, it grew into a palm-sized sapling. Its stem was crystalline and translucent, and it was branded with markings that were mysterious and chaotic. On its stem, tender green and soft branches extended out, covering the entire creation jade disc. At this moment, Lin Sun finally saw clearly that the power absorbed by the primordial myriad Tao tree was shockingly the battle brands collected by the creation jade disc on the road of heaven's chosen. That was the battle power left behind by every chosen one of the previous era. But now these battle powers were like nourishment, being constantly absorbed by the sapling of the primordial myriad Tao tree, and the sapling grew stronger and stronger. In just a quarter of an hour, it had grown to a foot tall. Its stem was like the clearest jade in the world, and its branches were like green immortal gold. It was brilliant and dreamy like a rain of light. P.S. I'll continue to update tonight. A few places have been squeezed out of the monthly vote rankings. Brothers and sisters, please vote for me. Chapter 2642. The deathly silent ruins were tainted with a divine aura, and the jade-green light was filled with an indescribably supreme aura. Lin Sun's heart trembled as if he was witnessing the birth of a miracle. Crack! The ruins near the primordial Tao tree split apart as countless fine and crystalline roots surged out, and its stem grew taller and thicker without end. The origin aura of the immortal Tao started to suffuse the air, and it was dense like rain. Lin Sun calmed his heart and sensed it, and he finally faintly understood that all those supreme experts had once entered the central immortal court when they were alive, and they'd all swallowed and refined the Tao fruits condensed from the primordial Tao tree. The energy of combat they'd left behind naturally contained the aura of the primordial Tao tree's energy. Now, the energy of combat was being fed back to the sapling of the primordial Tao tree, and it caused the tree to undergo an unbelievable transformation. Later on, Lin Sun noticed to his shock that the primordial Tao tree wasn't satisfied after absorbing all the energy of combat, and it started to absorb the energy of the Origin Tao scripture instead. The Origin Tao scripture is a compilation of the supreme inheritances of the immortal Tao, and it's said to be the origin of the immortal Tao. Could this energy be related to the primordial Tao tree? Before Lin Sun could figure it out, 33 branches appeared on the primordial Tao tree that had grown to a height of 33 meters. 33 meters represented the height of the tree. 33 faintly contained the intent to contain the heavens. After absorbing the energy of the Origin Tao scripture, leaves started to grow on the 33 branches, and they revealed a perfect, flawless, and pure aura. The veins on every leaf were different, yet they seemed to follow the natural trajectory of the Grand Tao, and they emanated a completely different aura of the Grand Tao. Lin soon determined with a single glance that there were a total of 3,000 leaves that had condensed. 3,000. Lin soon couldn't help but be shocked. The meaning that every single one of these numbers represented was too extraordinary. 9 was the extreme number. 33 represented the vastness of the heavens. 3,000 represented the boundless number of the Grand Tao. It was only a primordial Tao tree, yet it was filled with profundities in Lin Sun's eyes. Just as Lin Sun's eyes drifted, the transformation of the primordial Tao tree quietly ended. When she looked over once more, he saw that above the ruins was an azure glow that flowed like a waterfall, resplendent immortal radiance and seething Tao radiance. A 27 tall primordial mist tree that seemed as if it was constructed from chaotic immortal gold had 33 branches that stretched out and enveloped the entire tree. The entire tree was verdant and swayed with the glow of wisdom. Every single day, its leaves emanated a completely different and profound aura of the Tao. When one stood before it, it was like one was within an immortal realm. Their body, heart, and soul were bathed in a tranquil and peaceful aura of the Grand Tao, and they were able to comprehend the origins and profundities of the immortal Tao at the first possible moment. At this moment, Lin Sun had a strong impulse to meditate and ignore the ups and downs of the world, but he still resisted. The primordial myriad Tao tree hadn't condensed a Tao fruit, which made him feel slightly disappointed. Could it be that he had to wait another 100,000 years? Putting away the jade plate of fate, Lin Sun stopped for a moment and made a decision. He cultivated here and perfected his body. He didn't hold much hope towards being able to break through, because to become a martial ancestor required a fortuitous encounter, and that sort of fortuitous encounter was absolutely rare, something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. Right now, Lin Sun only wanted to take this opportunity to completely refine his Grand Tao. The martial ancestor was also known as the ancestor of a Tao, and those who became a martial ancestor at the peak could be called the martial ancestor. But Lin Sun wasn't willing to stop there. If he wanted to pursue a path that had never existed since ancient times, then he should prove that there was no Tao in the world. His Tao contained all the Taos in the world and all the laws in the world. Since that was the case, he should naturally seek the Tao of the martial ancestor. In fact, at this stage, the biggest problem wasn't the improvement of the realm. What he had to consider was how high his Tao could reach. This was because almost everyone would be stopped at the barrier of the martial ancestor. As long as there was enough time, a small realm could be cultivated, so it wasn't a problem. And anyone who wanted to dominate the Emperor's path would focus on the issue of combat strength. How could they become the strongest in the same realm? This was the most important thing. After all, the martial ancestor realm was the end of the Emperor's path. If one could be invincible in this realm, then it would be the only peak on the Emperor's path, able to suppress the ages and look down on the Emperor's path. It was unparalleled. Lin Sun sat cross-legged under the primordial Tao tree like a statue of a god, dignified, and he immediately fell into a wondrous and indescribable state of cultivation. Dreamlike green light drifted down from the primordial Tao tree and bathed his entire body in it. His entire body was soaked in the aura of the immortal Tao. This made him feel as if he'd fallen into the origin of the immortal Tao, and his understanding and comprehension of the Grand Tao had reached a shocking level. He didn't even need to waste time to figure it out, and he could directly peek into the original essence of the immortal Tao, comprehend it in his heart, and contain it in his body. This was incredible. It was no different from the rumored, once you comprehend the Tao, you will be enlightened. And this naturally belonged to the power of the primordial Tao tree. It was the root of the immortal world, and it converged the origin of the immortal Tao. It was the supreme treasure of the central immortal court, and it was the greatest fortune of the last era. So it was naturally extraordinary. In fact, while he was comprehending and meditating here, Lin Sun had already experienced its profundities, and it had practically completely overturned his understanding. Time flowed by. Later on, Lin Sun's entire aura formed a perfect fit with the primordial Tao tree, and it seemed as if the primordial Tao tree had already transformed into a part of the aura in his body. Later on, various unimaginable phenomena of the Grand Tao started to surge around his body. Wind and thunder shook the ears, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled, and it seemed as if the heavens and the earth were being split apart. The aura was so terrifying that it seemed as if it could make all the Taos in the world bow beneath its feet. His vital energy and blood boiled, and he emanated an indescribable aura. His figure transformed into a furnace at times, and then into an abyss at times. During this period of time, the various profundities of the Grand Tao that he'd fused into his body surged and appeared without end, and they transformed into the universe, the stars, the landscape, the birds, the beasts, the lightning, the earth, and the fire. Lin soon transformed the various Grand Tao from what he'd learned in the past to what he'd comprehended now, and he deduced them ceaselessly. In the end, his entire body seemed to have vanished, and there was only a large abyss that floated up and down. It completely swallowed the universe, mountains, rivers, geography, and everything that had been formed. He was boundlessly domineering, and his entire body carried an insane aura. He seemed as if he intended to sweep through the 3,000 worlds and swallow the world. In the end, the aura around Lin Sun's body calmed down and quieted down. Only his body and mind were enshrouded by the Grand Tao, and it was like the tranquil ocean, condensed and magnificent. Later on, various laws of the immortal Tao emerged around his body, and they flowed brilliantly as the profundities of the immortal Tao of the last era appeared one by one. It was a completely different scene of the Grand Tao. From the Violet Mansion to the Golden Palace, from entering the Golden Core to embracing Nirvana, and it radiated the unique primitive Tao of the immortal Tao. Lin Sun was completely unaware of the passage of time. In fact, he'd already forgotten himself at this moment, and his body and mind were in harmony with the Tao. After an unknown period of time, his figure transformed into an abyss once more, and half of the Grand Tao he derived belonged to the Tao he'd controlled in the past, and it was the extreme Tao of this era. The other half belonged to the immortal Tao of the last era. This was like the profundities of the Grand Tao of two eras had appeared on him alone, and it was ceaselessly being deduced and transformed. The energy of the Grand Tao became more and more complicated, more and more obscure, and more indescribable. On the other hand, Lin Sun's body carried a type of exuberant aura, and it carried a form of unfathomability that was like an abyss. No one knew that at this moment, he was carrying out an unprecedented fusion of the complete profundities of the immortal Tao with his own Grand Tao. To the cultivators of this era, even if they were able to comprehend and grasp the Grand Tao of the last era, it was only a portion of it, and it was utterly impossible for it to be complete. But to Lin Sun, he possessed the Netherhell Tao and immortal Tao of the last era. Both of them were complete systems of Grand Taos, and they contained the most primitive and essential profundities. This meant that he'd succeeded in fusing the Tao this time, and he possessed the energy of the Grand Tao of two eras. If it was in the past, then Lin Sun was bound to not be able to accomplish this in a short period of time. But it was different now. Under the primordial Tao tree, it allowed him to easily comprehend and grasp the profundities of the Grand Tao of the last era, and it gave him a superb opportunity to fuse the Tao. The primordial Tao tree swayed while its crystalline and translucent green leaves flickered brilliantly, and it sprinkled down a rain of light that was extremely peaceful. In the last era, exactly how many exalts of the immortal Tao had stood beneath this tree and deduced their own techniques and Tao? Now, Lin Sun was comprehending the Tao beneath this tree as well. In the end, Lin Sun was like a celestial emperor that had descended to the mortal world. Every single breath, he took resonated with the various grand daos, and it was like the sound of chanting that rumbled and shook the world. On the other hand, the imposing aura on his body grew stronger and stronger, like a volcano that would erupt at any moment, and every inch of his skin surged with peerless energy of the Grand Tao. Early on, when he was in Chaotian City, Lin Sun's cultivation had already attained the peak of the 8th level of the Emperor realm, and at this moment, as he ceaselessly comprehended the Grand Tao, his cultivation actually felt restless. But at this moment, Lin Sun didn't have the mood to care about this at all. If he could integrate all the Daos of the last era into his body, then when he proved his Tao, he was destined to display a power that was different from this era. This was what Lin Sun cared about. Time passed day by day. Under the primordial Tao tree, Lin Sun's body couldn't be seen at all. It was completely submerged by the vast energy of the Grand Tao that was like a rain of light. The translucent green leaves on the tree swayed like a scripture, and rays of light fell down, making Lin Sun even more hazy. Until half a month later, the place where Lin Sun's figure was located produced an indescribable sonorous sound of the Grand Tao. All the energy of the Grand Tao seemed to be drawn together and condensed. Gradually, the embryonic form of a furnace appeared, and it was constantly perfected and refined. In the end, the primordial Tao tree trembled violently. Lin Sun's figure was like a great abyss, swallowing all the surging Grand Tao nearby and merging it into the furnace. Then it disappeared into Lin Sun's body. All the strange phenomena disappeared. All the light of the Grand Tao was silent. Only Lin Sun's figure, sitting cross-legged, seemed to exist forever. P.S. Added and sent. Chapter 2643. The leaves of the primordial myriad Tao tree flipped and rustled like pages of ancient scriptures being unfolded, emitting the sonorous voice of the great Tao that sounded like chanting. It was as if he was describing the beginning of the universe and the process of the birth of the world. There was only a single figure beneath the tree, quietly sitting cross-legged like a boulder. From start to finish, he didn't move at all, yet he seemed to possess the aura of an eternal existence. At this moment, Lin Sun seemed to have completely fused the immortal path and netherworld path of the last era with his own cultivation, and he'd cultivated them together to transcend the present world and be unparalleled throughout the ages. Soundlessly, an obscure and inexplicable aura of calamity emerged. Under the Hongmeng tree, Lin Sun opened his eyes quietly. His expression was tranquil like an ancient well, while his black eyes were clear and ethereal. He stood up and stretched the tendons and bones in his body, and then he started to display the various techniques he possessed. It was as if he didn't realize that an unprecedented calamity was brewing and would fall at any moment. Merging all Daos, developing all techniques at this moment. At this time, Lin Sun's mind was still immersed in the wonderful state of Tao enlightenment. As he ran his Tao, all kinds of Tao appeared. Sword scripture, fist scripture, palm print, finger method. Different Tao, all showed different powers. At this moment, tens of thousands of strands of the Tao interweaved together and transformed into all sorts of unbelievable scenes. It was like numerous immortals were practicing, and they were either overbearing, peerless, unrestrained like the wind. The gods were howling, the devils were roaring, and the 3,000 leaves of the primordial tree emitted the aura of countless supreme techniques of the immortal Tao that developed into a boundlessly terrifying scene. It seemed as if countless supreme gods were deducing the Tao arts they each possessed, and every single one of them possessed a great imposing aura that could suppress the past, present, and future. The most powerful Taoism, the most powerful inheritance, and the flowing scriptures were all reflected in Lin Sun's body. He was like a heavenly emperor. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled with every raise of his hand, and the heavens exploded. It was as if everything was going to be destroyed. Every single movement he made was the extreme of the Tao, possessing matchless divine force. The primordial Tao tree had 3,000 green leaves, which represented the endless inheritance of the immortal Tao. At this moment, they resonated with Lin Sun's Tao. At the same time, on the plateau below the central immortal court, 20 days had passed. Qi Lingyun, Zhongli Xiao, and the other cultivators had been waiting all this time, and they seemed to be very patient. This little bit of time was nothing to existences like them. After all, some emperor-ancestor realm existences could easily go into seclusion for hundreds or thousands of years. However, right at this moment, a terrifying aura of calamity effused out, and it caused their hearts to shake and swiftly raise their heads. A wisp of a pitch-black tribulation cloud that was pitch-black like ink had suddenly appeared in the sky, and an oppressive aura that seemed capable of obliterating the world swept out along with it. The aura was so terrifying that even the imperial ancestors couldn't help but turn pale, and their hearts trembled. What kind of calamity is this? How terrifying! Everyone present here was experienced and knowledgeable. Since they'd started cultivating until now, they'd experienced the ups and downs of the world, and they'd become accustomed to seeing all sorts of phenomena in the world. But at this moment, all of them were surprised and bewildered, and they revealed expressions of disbelief. Because the aura of such a calamity was absolutely something they'd never heard of or seen before. This shouldn't be Lin Sun's ancestor realm tribulation, right? At this moment, even Zhong Lixiao was unable to maintain his calm, and his pupils constricted while they were filled with bewilderment. The Extinction Ancestor Tribulation, an unprecedented Extinction Ancestor Tribulation. Qi Lingyun's eyes revealed a rare expression of shock as well, and she'd lost her composure at this moment. How could this be possible? Mu Yi was astounded. Even the aura of the tribulation I experienced when I became an ancestral ancestor wasn't so terrifying. Qi Pejuan's expression wavered indeterminately as well. All of them were from the 8th heaven, and they were imperial ancestors of the Juxian heaven. So, they were far more clearly aware of how terrifying and abnormal it was to become an ancestral ancestor. Merely for the sake of obtaining a strand of an opportunity to attain the Tao, it was capable of trapping numerous extraordinary figures. Moreover, the great calamity one faced when one truly attained the Tao was formidable to the point of practically causing one to despair. For example, all of them had exhausted all their efforts and utilized the strength of their entire clans in order to obtain this strand of opportunity to attain the Tao with great difficulty. Moreover, when they transcended the tribulation, they even had the protection of their ancestors, countless peerless treasures to protect themselves, and spirit pills that could be called precious treasures of the heavens and the earth to prolong their lives. It could be said that they mobilized the power of their entire clan and made full preparations to finally step into the threshold of the Juxian heaven ancestor. But even so, as far as they knew, some characters who were as outstanding as them and had the same status as them had fallen in such a great calamity. They were all proud figures cultivated by the immortal giants with countless painstaking efforts. From this, one could see the horror of the tribulation of the Juxian heaven ancestor. However, compared with the aura of the tribulation in front of them, Qi Lingyun and the others all found that the ancestral tribulation they had experienced in the past was completely insignificant. This was the reason why they were surprised and lost their composure. Seeing the Juxian heaven ancestor lose their composure like this, the other cultivators present couldn't remain calm. Did this mean that it was precisely because Lin Sun had a more terrifying and abnormal foundation in this realm that the great calamity triggered at this time was more terrible than what Qi Lingyun and the others had experienced in the past? After all, it was well known that the more terrible the calamity triggered, the more terrifying the cultivation of the person who was transcending it was. Boom! The sky had turned into the color of the eternal night, completely covered by the dark and oppressive tribulation clouds. There was no light at all. The indescribable aura of destruction caused the world to fall into a terrifying atmosphere. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines while their hearts palpitated. At this moment, the bodies of Qi Lingyun and the others felt cold as well. They realized that this calamity could absolutely be said to be rare since time immemorial. It had exceeded their understanding as well. Merely this alone caused them to feel extremely uncomfortable. Even if they were unwilling, they had no choice but to admit that they couldn't compare to Lin Sun all those years ago. Otherwise, the difference in the calamity they caused wouldn't be so great. It's simply the luck of the heavens. Lin Sun entered the central Dao court and obtained a supreme treasure. Now, he's even grasped a trace of an opportunity to draw down such a vast calamity. If he attains the Juxian Heaven Ancestor realm at the peak, then wouldn't he be able to crush all his peers in the world? Zhong Lixiao's face was gloomy while his chest felt heavy. Under such a great calamity, Lin Sun doesn't have anyone to protect him, nor is he fully prepared. So, his chances of survival are bound to be extremely slim, said Qi Pejuan coldly. Even if he has a chance to overcome the tribulation successfully, we absolutely can't allow him to succeed. Qi Lingyun's mellow and indifferent voice revealed a wisp of resolution, and a rare trace of bone-piercing coldness appeared in her eyes. Such a great calamity had never been seen since time immemorial. Once Lin Sun succeeded in overcoming it, who in the same realm could suppress his arrogance? At that time, Zhu Xian would probably be the supreme Zhu Xian Heaven Ancestor realm. Such a thing absolutely couldn't be allowed to happen. Everyone, please take a look. After the arrival of this great calamity, the power of rules in this world has begun to show signs of collapse. If I'm not wrong, it won't be long before the power that covers the Chosen One's path will collapse. At that time, we can all head to the central Dao court together. As soon as Qi Lingyun's words were spoken, everyone present became restless. After careful observation, they noticed that it was as Qi Lingyun had said, the power of rules in this world had begun to become chaotic. It was even to the extent that the power of rules that suppressed their cultivation showed signs of loosening and disintegrating. That's even better. Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejuan, and the others revealed killing intent. Lin Sun's threat was too great, and he'd seized the fortune of this place. If they didn't eliminate him, they wouldn't be able to eat and sleep in peace. Bang! A thunderclap resounded from the depths of the dense black tribulation clouds, and it was simply like the first sound that split the heavens and the earth apart. It resounded through the heavens and the earth, and it shook one to the point one's blood roiled while one saw stars. The supreme might of the heavens was truly too terrifying. After that, a wave of thunderclaps that shook the world resounded, and it seemed like an army of gods had charged out from the depths of the tribulation clouds. A myriad of dazzling and resplendent thunderstorms transformed into a vast ocean, and then numerous mighty figures that seemed like gods charged out from within the ocean. They were bathed in the glow of lightning, and they held the might of the heavens as they charged towards the central Dao court. Merely the sight of this scene caused everyone to feel suffocated, and they almost lost their composure. All of them were astounded. Isn't this great calamity a little too abnormal and terrifying? The more it was like this, the firmer Qi Lingyun was in her heart to annihilate Lin Sun. Earlier, she'd held the thought of subduing Lin Sun and making him submit to her, but now all of that had been replaced by killing intent. If you die beneath the heavenly tribulation, then it'll be over. If I have the chance to survive, then I'll bury you here forever. Qi Lingyun stared fixedly at the Chosen One's path, and she was waiting for the energy of the rules that covered it to be destroyed. The central Dao court. The primordial Dao tree stood towering while a myriad of strands of brilliant jade-green light of the Dao flowed through it, and it wasn't affected by the heavenly tribulation at all. Up until this moment, Lin Sun who stood beneath it actually seemed as if he hadn't noticed it at all, and he was deducing the various supreme inheritances and techniques with all his might. Rumble! A group of mighty figures that were formed from the calamity arrived while bathed in lightning. The weapons in their hands were formed from the might of the heavens, and they were boundlessly terrifying. However, before they could even approach, they were blasted apart by a strand of invisible and terrifying might, and they transformed into an explosive rain of lightning that swept towards the surroundings. Dazzling light illuminated the hall that was suffused with a boundless expanse of white mist, and it shone onto Lin Sun, who was practicing all kinds of supreme inheritances and infinite Tao, under Lin Sun's deduction, turned into the power of landslides and tsunamis, shaking and spreading. On the other hand, all the lightning figures that charged over were obliterated by this might. At this moment, Lin Sun was both developing his techniques and overcoming the heavenly tribulation. However, his mind was immersed in a strange state, and it caused everything to seem very different. The power of the calamity was extremely violent and terrifying. It poured down ceaselessly, and it transformed into a terrifying phenomenon that seemed like the end of the world, and it was aimed at him alone. If it was anyone else, they would have probably collapsed in despair a long time ago. However, Lin Sun was neither fast nor slow, neither arrogant nor rash, and neither sad nor happy. He was immersed in the martial arts practice, and he'd completely forgotten himself as he stretched his body in a leisurely manner. As he raised his hand, he ceaselessly struck out various techniques, and he was deducing and fusing them with all his might. This was like the extreme sublimation of breaking out of a cocoon into a butterfly, and he intended to attain that moment of beauty. P.S. The second one was slightly later. Chapter 2644. Under the primordial Daos tree, the divine light was boiling. Even if one stood on the cliff below the central immortal court, one could clearly see that in the magnificent immortal palace, numerous gods and demons were roaring between heaven and earth, infinite Taoist light was soaring in the sky, and thousands of scriptures were resonating and rumbling. Even the surging and violent thunder retribution ocean couldn't cover the sound of the great way that came from that place, which was too grand and boundless. Lin Sun's figure was like the ruler of the heavens, practicing martial arts under the primordial Daos tree. Every time he waved his hand, thousands of scriptures resonated, stars appeared all over the sky, and endless phenomena surged. Boom! A spear swept through the sky from outer space, and it was entwined with the power of divine punishment. It was like the spear of judgment from the ruler of heaven, and the aura of calamity was even more terrifying than before. Lin Sun's mind was empty, and he completely forgot himself as he fell into enlightenment. But the aura around his body reacted at the first time, and then he punched out. The flames were monstrous, and a vermilion bird screamed and flew out of the blazing fist, burning half of the sky. The spear of divine punishment that came violently like judgment was immediately blocked by this punch. It produced a violent buzz in the void, and then it was shaken to the point of exploding inch by inch, and the splashing rain of lightning swept out like a waterfall. Such a terrifying attack was still weak in front of Lin Sun at this moment. The power of calamity in the depths of the sky seemed to be infuriated, and then there were dazzling divine chains that spread down like divine punishment. There were tens of thousands of them, and they covered the sky and the earth like the whip of chaos that was dancing wildly, lashing the universe. The scene was so terrifying that it made the practitioners on the cliff suffocate and turn pale with horror. Looking from afar, thousands of divine chains were like a cage that descended from the sky, and they intended to restrain, suppress, and destroy the person crossing the tribulation. In the immortal palace, Lin Sun's expression was as calm as before. He shook his fists, plucked the sun with his left hand, and pinched the moon with his right. He was like an ancient god descending, and there was brilliance and matchless divine power everywhere. The unparalleled power swept across and shattered the divine chains, and they fell continuously in the void like a broken dead snake, and a rain of light was like a tide. His aura engulfed an area of 5,000 kilometers, and he executed the supreme Tao arts he'd gathered to the fullest. The dense divine chains were utterly unable to touch his figure before they were swept and crushed by the might he emanated, and it was an extremely shocking scene. This was a grand scene. 1,000 grand daos and a myriad of Tao arts resounded without end, while clanging sounds resounded without end. The phenomena of various Tao arts appeared in unison and transformed into the most terrifying light in the world. They ceaselessly interweaved and resonated in space, and they faintly showed signs of fusing into one and undergoing an extreme transformation. Rumbling thunder came from his body, and his blood surged like a great river, and it was deafening like the sea. All types of scriptures began to appear on the surface of his body, engraved with mysterious imprints. As he breathed in and out, there was a great might that could sweep through the 9 heavens. Above the sky, a terrifying tribulation that could be said to have never been seen since time immemorial was ceaselessly pouring down, a force that seemed like it could destroy the world, and it transformed into various shocking scenes. The cultivators on the plateau, even those as powerful as Qi Lingyun, Zhong Li Xiao, and the other Juetian great ancestors, were occasionally shocked, and their expressions changed, because the might of the apocalyptic calamity had clearly become more and more abnormal, more and more terrifying, and it had completely exceeded their understanding. Even in the 8th heaven of the eternal world, such a disaster had never appeared before. But no matter how powerful the heavenly disaster became, every single time it descended into the world, Lin Sun would shatter it without him realizing it. He was like a legendary Kuan that had the potential to soar 90,000 lis, and the power to swallow the sky. Why isn't he dead yet? Zhong Li Xiao could not remain calm on the plateau. The heavenly disaster was so terrifying that even he was shocked and terrified, but it showed no signs of disappearing. This meant that Lin Sun had not encountered any danger, and he was still fighting against the disaster. Qi Pejuan and the others were also in disbelief. If it was them in the past, the power of the disaster they faced would be far inferior to what they were seeing now. But even so, they had still endured many hardships and been heavily injured. They had even struggled on the edge of life and death many times before they finally succeeded in passing the disaster. But now, Lin Sun's disaster was so powerful, but it had not ended yet. Didn't this mean that if Lin Sun succeeded in passing the disaster, his attainments in the progenitor realm would far surpass theirs? Who could accept this? We can't let him live. Qi Pejuan said word by word. The power of rules here has broken. Let's go. Suddenly, Qi Lingyun spoke, and a terrifying golden light shone in her eyes. At this moment, her elegant bearing that was like an orchid had vanished, while her suppressed cultivation had recovered at this moment, and she emanated boundless might. Moreover, her graceful figure was coiled by strands of golden and bright ancestor realm laws, causing her to seem like a celestial or god. She immediately stepped forward, heading towards the heaven's chosen path. Almost at the same time, all the cultivators present noticed that their suppressed cultivation had recovered, and the power of rules in the world had become completely chaotic and shattered. Let's go! Zhong Li Xiao, Qi Pejuan, and the others who couldn't restrain themselves since a long time ago shot into the sky with killing intent and emanated terrifying might. They were like gods as they flashed towards the immortal court at the peak of the mountain. Numerous cultivators were participating behind them. Earlier, Qi Lingyun and the others had agreed that so long as they went to deal with Lin Sun, they would bring them to the 8th heaven to cultivate. So, at this moment, they didn't hesitate to follow along. Uncle, what should we do? Xiang Xiaoyuan asked anxiously via voice transmission. Our lives were given to us by Lin Sun. Now that he's about to suffer calamity, what harm is there in giving our lives back to him? Lu Xiangchue took a deep breath and decided. All right. Both of them immediately took action. Come, let's go take a look as well. Gu Banzwang and Yun Luohong glanced at each other, and then they led their clansmen to take action as well. For a time, only a little over 10 people remained on the plateau, and most of them had followed them to the immortal court at the center. The tribulation clouds roiled while lightning surged, and the aura of the tribulation grew even more terrifying. However, these tribulations were targeted at Lin Sun alone. Even though it was an extremely great threat to all the cultivators that had recovered their cultivations, it didn't affect their actions. Within the immortal court at the center, a heavenly punishment guillotine slashed down with a peerlessly dazzling blade light that seemed capable of splitting the heavens and the earth apart. Clang! Countless strands of sword chi flew out before Lin Sun, and they transformed into a profound and unfathomable sword formation that blocked this lethal strike. The heavenly punishment guillotine was only locked in a stalemate for less than a moment before it was crushed by the boundless sword chi. On the other hand, Lin Sun seemed as if he didn't notice this, and he was still practicing. The primordial Tao tree by his side emanated a myriad of strands of azure light while the sound of scriptures being chanted ceaselessly, and it caused Lin Sun to seem like an immortal from the last era that was creating techniques for his subordinates. When Qi Lingyun and the others charged into the immortal court, they saw such a scene, and they couldn't help but gasp while their hearts trembled. In their expectations, even if Lin Sun was still alive after encountering such an unprecedented tribulation, he would probably be heavily injured and on the verge of death. But the reality was that Lin Sun was utterly unharmed. How is this transcending tribulation? He's clearly comprehending the Tao. Technique development. Someone cried out involuntarily and was shocked. He was still able to comprehend the Tao under such a great tribulation. All of this seemed to be too unbelievable. The hearts of everyone were unable to calm down, and they noticed Lin Sun's current state as well. They couldn't help but feel that it was inconceivable, and it was as if they were witnessing a miracle. All of them had experienced the vicissitudes of life, and they'd watched the rise and fall of the world. What sort of great storms and strange events hadn't they seen before? But the scene before their eyes had completely exceeded their imagination, and it was even to the extent that they were unable to understand it. It's the power of the primordial Tao tree. The legendary root of the immortal world actually survived the destruction of the last era. Mu Yi's eyes were bloodshot, and his heart was burning. He was so excited that he was slightly out of control. Even in the eternal true world, the primordial myriad Tao tree was without a doubt a supreme divine object, and it was practically impossible to see it. Unbelievable, too unbelievable. No wonder Lin Sun was able to draw down the ultimate ancestral tribulation. The primordial Tao tree was born from the karmic luck of the last era, and it's said to be the origin of the immortal Tao. It's sufficient for anyone to grasp a chance to attain the Tao. Zhong Lixiao was stunned as well, and his gaze was filled with fervor. There was only a single thought in his mind, and it was to seize this treasure no matter what. Even though Qi Pejuan didn't speak, the resolution in his eyes revealed that he was determined to obtain the primordial Tao tree as well. At this moment, the fluctuations caused by Lin Sun's technique development were too great. 10,000 scriptures resonated, 3,000 grand daos appeared, and he'd even drawn down an unprecedented great tribulation. Even if it was at an ordinary time, the others would still want to kill him, let alone at such a critical moment. No one wished for him to live. Not to mention that the primordial Tao tree that was reputed to be the supreme treasure of the last era was glowing with a jade-green light. Its leaves fluttered as if it was chanting scriptures, and it was shocking and caused everyone to covet it. However, the heavenly tribulation was still going on, and it caused no matter how the killing intent in their hearts burned, none of them dared to approach it as they were deeply afraid of being affected by it. Even if he survives after overcoming the tribulation, he'll definitely be at his weakest. At that time, destroy him at the first possible moment. Qi Lingyun decided on the spot and gave the order. The others nodded. They were distributed throughout the surroundings, and they seemed to be in a tight encirclement while accumulating strength while waiting, causing the atmosphere in the central immortal court to become even more murderous and terrifying. The gazes everyone shot at Lin Sun wished for nothing more than for him to be struck to death by the heavenly tribulation right away. However, to their disappointment, the surging heavenly tribulation was blasted apart by the might emanated from Lin Sun's body, and it was unable to injure him in the slightest. The more it was like this, the more fearful those cultivators were, and their killing intent towards him grew even stronger. They didn't dare imagine how terrifying the ancestor realm cultivation such a heaven-defying figure possessed would be if he was allowed to survive. At that time, could anyone of the same generation in the world go against him? The dazzling glow of lightning illuminated the expressions of these people to the point their expressions flickered indeterminately, whereas Lin Sun, who'd always been in a state of comprehension, seemed to be completely unaware of all of this. They didn't have to wait for long. The final wave of the heavenly tribulation had arrived. The boundless violet-gold lightning torrents in the depths of the sky had condensed into a ball, and it transformed into a strange decree. The decree revealed a chaotic color that was like ink, and it flowed with the aura of a myriad of tribulations. Moreover, countless obscure and indescribable marks of destruction surged into appearance on it. The sorrowful sighs of the gods could be faintly heard from within the decree. P.S. I wasn't in a good state, so I didn't update tonight. Chapter 26:45. The entire place was deathly silent. All of them were shocked by the decree formed from the final tribulation, because the aura that suffused it was simply terrifying to the point that even the hearts of all of them who were spectators were shaken. It was too terrifying. It was filled with a strange and unknown color that had never been seen or heard of since ancient times. When the talisman swept down, it was silent and ignored the shackles of time and space. In an instant, it covered Lin Sun's entire body. The peerless power that emanated from Lin Sun's body couldn't resist it at all. Under the horrified gazes of everyone, Lin Sun, who was immersed in enlightenment and method development, suddenly froze, motionless. Everyone knew that Lin Sun had encountered a fatal danger. Silently, the strange and terrifying talisman emitted a destructive rain of lightning, and vaguely, traces of obscure order power surged out. The expressions of Qi Lingyun and the others changed. The order power within the talisman tribulation lightning simply exceeded their understanding and imagination. It was terrifying to the extreme. At the very least, its power wasn't inferior to the rarest order power of Heaven Rank 9. Qi Lingyun and the others all had immortal forces behind them, standing tall in the 8th heaven. Their understanding of order power was naturally far from ordinary people. One could imagine how terrifying the order power within the talisman tribulation lightning was to be able to make them tremble in fear. They don't intend to give him any chance to become an ancestor. He definitely won't be able to resist such a tribulation. Zhongli Zhao's heart was burning with eagerness. He was waiting for Lin Sun's death to snatch the primordial Dao tree. What a pity! Qi Lingyun sighed. Lin Sun's cultivation was powerful. If the Qi clan could use him, he would definitely be of great use in the future. However, Qi Lingyun didn't feel regretful. She would only be at ease if Lin Sun died. At this moment, everyone could see that Lin Sun couldn't make it. No matter how heaven-defying and dazzling his performance was, he couldn't resist the talisman tribulation lightning at all. Rise! Suddenly, a roar sounded, and Mu Yi's figure rushed out. He actually made a move at this moment. From 100 feet away, he raised his hand and threw out an alms bowl. It was filled with an ancient and terrifying aura, and a cold light flashed as it covered the primordial Dao tree. Obviously, he couldn't wait any longer and intended to seize the primordial myriad Dao tree first. The faces of Qi Lingyun, Zhong Lixiao, Qi Pejuan, and the others sank, and they were just about to stop him. Boom! An earth-shattering sound suddenly resounded, and it shook everyone present to the point their vital blood roiled while their hearts trembled. Lin Sun, who was imprisoned by the talisman tribulation lightning, emitted a golden aura that transformed into a figure that swung its fists with unparalleled might. This was not Lin Sun's real body, but his fighting will. It was the invincible method. he had been refining and deducing during this period of time. At this moment, it gave birth to the most powerful martial will. Bang! The black alms bowl was sent flying with a single punch. That golden mandate unleashed its battle prowess in the air, as if an immortal was practicing his martial arts. Another punch was thrown out. Merely this imposing aura caused this expanse of the heavens and the earth to fall into disorder, and it caused the bodies of some cultivators in the vicinity to stiffen while their minds fell into disorder. It was so uncomfortable that they coughed up blood. There were even a few people who were severely injured by that level of martial will and were sent flying. Everyone was horrified and dumbfounded. How powerful was this martial will? What kind of Tao and method did Lin Sun evolve? He was actually strong to such a level, and it deeply shocked everyone's heart. Mu Yi turned pale with fright. Who would have thought that Lin Sun, who was supposed to be dead for sure, would have such an invincible martial will appear at this critical moment? The alms bowl was sent flying, and Lin Sun's martial will punched through the air. Brilliant lights flew across the sky, and in the end only a golden fist was left. Covered the entire area and smashed down with great force. Mu Yi could not dodge it no matter how he tried, let alone block it. The treasures in his hands were destroyed one after another, bursting into a rain of light. His whole body was trembling. It was the first time he was so afraid, and it was even more unbelievable. He, the Juetian great ancestor, could not even block a single martial will? But it was too late. This was an invincible martial will that Lin Sun had cultivated while comprehending Tao. It directly smashed Mu Yi, and he exploded with a loud bang. Broken bones and flesh splattered everywhere. Both his body and soul were destroyed. How is this possible? Many people cried out involuntarily, feeling cold all over. This was just a kind of fist intent. Lin Sun's real body was imprisoned by the talisman Tribulation Thunder, but he easily killed a Juetian great ancestor. This made everyone's hair stand on end. Qi Lingyun, Zhongli Shao, and the others felt a chill in their hearts. Mu Yi's combat strength was not much worse than theirs, but he was killed by a single martial will. Even his life-saving treasures could not block that terrifying punch. In fact, this punch was too fast, too fierce, and too overbearing. Mu Yi did not even have time to use his trump card before he died. But even so, this bloody scene was terrifying in the eyes of everyone. Under the Hongming tree, Lin Sun suddenly opened his eyes. They were like two golden lamps, dazzling. Wherever his eyes passed, many people felt as if their souls were being torn apart, and their pores stood on end. Although he was still covered by the talisman Tribulation Thunder and had not moved, he had already emitted an extremely strong and powerful aura that made everyone tremble. His eyes were sharp, like an unsheathed sword, extremely brilliant. They drew bolts of lightning in the sky and rushed in all directions, shocking everyone. Just his gaze was so terrifying. How strong was his martial will? Many people's hearts trembled, their backs were cold, and they had goosebumps. Lin Sun, who was thought to be dead, did not turn into ashes. Instead, he opened his eyes and revealed an unparalleled power. This was beyond everyone's expectations. It even made people suspect that he had comprehended his own supreme great method, and had the strength to look down on all the people in the same realm. Far away from the crowd, Xiang Xiaoyuan and Lu Xiangchua's hearts relaxed, and the depths of their eyes were filled with extreme excitement. He woke up. Lin Sun did not die. In enlightenment, one's mind wandered into the void, forgetting oneself and everything else. There was only Tao in one's eyes, and nothing else could be tolerated. This was also the reason why cultivators would choose a quiet place to cultivate in seclusion, far away from the clamor of the world. Especially for deep-level enlightenment. For people like Lin Sun, he was completely oblivious to himself, and his mind wandered into the void, forgetting everything. Even if a great tribulation descended, it would be difficult for him to wake up. Now, he had finally woken up. This was naturally the scene that all the cultivators present were most unwilling to see. Under the Hongmeng tree, the myriad of leaves swayed and rustled as if they were flipping through ancient scriptures and reciting the eternal laws and Tao that crossed the past, present, and future, resounding without end. Suddenly, a strand of blood flowed out from the corner of Lin Sun's mouth, and it dripped onto his clothes. It was a shocking sight, and it stunned many people. After that, they realized that Lin Sun might have woken up from enlightenment, but he was still imprisoned by the talisman tribulation thunder, and the power of the tribulation still hadn't been dispelled. The expressions of Qi Lingyun, Zhongli Xiao, and Qi Pejuan were very interesting. Just a moment ago they were shocked and worried, but in the next moment they relaxed, and their brows stretched as they revealed a look of relief. Hey, the tribulation hasn't disappeared. It's most likely that his Taoist foundation has been injured. Someone said gloatingly. That mandate will from earlier had clearly caused him to suffer a backlash. Right now, he's just putting on a strong front but weak on the inside. Who's going up to take his head? Someone laughed out loud. In truth, this was a test. Although they said so, no one stepped forward. They were all looking at the others for fear of following in Mu Yi's footsteps. After all, that scene was too terrifying. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd with a sneer on his lips. Instead, he closed his eyes with a calm posture as if he wasn't afraid that they dared to attack him. He was savoring the wonderful state of enlightenment just now. The harvest this time was really too great. In one fell swoop, he completely fused the immortal path and the netherworld path that belonged to the last era with the cultivation of this era and achieved an extreme transformation. Moreover, the various Taoist skills that he mastered were also completely fused with the complete immortal path that belonged to the origin Taoist code, and achieved the ultimate breakthrough. It could be said that he had thoroughly refined Taoist and Dharma to the extreme and completely fused them, showing a complete and immeasurable transformation. As for the matter of passing the tribulation, it was completely unintentional. After achieving the extreme breakthrough of his Taoist and Dharma, his cultivation also broke through in one fell swoop and reached an incredible level. When flowers bloom, butterflies come. It was the enlightenment in front of the Hongmeng tree that made Lin Sun, who was completely unprepared for breaking the realm, naturally achieve a real comprehensive transformation. As for the talisman tribulation thunder that was imprisoned in his body, Lin Sun didn't care about it at all. The strange destructive power of the order imprinted in it might be able to easily kill an immortal. But at this moment, it was like a prey that came to the door, being suppressed and refined by the nirvana order little by little. The only drawback was that the power of the talisman tribulation thunder could not be completely refined. With his current cultivation, he couldn't escape from the imprisonment. But Lin Sun didn't care. It was also at this moment that everyone suddenly noticed that the talisman tribulation thunder that imprisoned Lin Sun was actually faintly showing signs of being swallowed by Lin Sun's body. It was branded with the strange and unknown destructive power of the order, and it represented divine punishment. How could it be refined? Everyone's expression changed, and they realized that the situation was bad. We must not allow him to survive this tribulation. Attack. Qi Lingyun, who had always been indifferent and elegant, was completely unable to remain calm at this moment. Even the talisman that was branded with the order of the tribulation couldn't kill him. If he was allowed to survive, how terrifying would his power be? Bang! Zhongli Xiao was the first to attack. He opened his mouth and whistled, and a gale tore through the void and swept towards the Hongmeng tree. A Taoist diagram surged out from the gale, and it rumbled as it pressed down. It was more of a defensive force. Obviously, he was mainly testing Lin Sun. Moreover, he didn't attack Lin Sun directly for the sake of the Hongmeng tree because he was probably extremely fearful of Lin Sun. Lin Sun's eyes were still closed, and he remained motionless. However, a strand of mighty and dazzling martial will charged out from his body, and he stretched out his hands in the void and tore it lightly. The mysterious Taoist diagram that was wrapped in the gale was torn into two on the spot.